Good evening, good evening, good evening, and good evening to you, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode number 761 for August 17th, 2020. And true weather weenies know what happened on this date 51 years ago, 1969. Hurricane Camille came inland, landfall of Hurricane Camille. And we might talk about that, but a lot of stuff going on here. So thank you for joining us. This is the incredible part of the program where we do three things. We share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and occasionally, every once in a while, we say outrageous things. So let's get everybody on the shoe here. Should be a good one tonight. A lot of stuff going on. Much to discuss. All right, so here we go. We're on the Zoom tonight. I think next week we might have to be on the Google Meet, which for you, it won't mean any difference, but for me, it's a nightmare, but that's okay. We'll make it happen. I think the key to doing Google Meet streaming live on YouTube, you need two computers to do it, to do what I have to do. You need two. So I'm going to take this. I've got an old machine in here that I can use, I think, to do that. I was kind of playing with it today, because I wasn't totally sure about tonight, but we are on Zoom, which is very easy to do. Thank goodness. So here we go. I think Jen is out tonight. Hopefully everybody else is in. So here we go. We'll find out here in a second. Yeah, August 17th. School's back in session for most people, I think, whatever form or shape that happens to be. And what's odd, I am still grounded. I cannot speak publicly, which is just a continuation of the odd year that it's been. And for those that don't know, I'm typically in 1 to 2 schools a day. So that's a pretty good chunk of my day. And of course, a lot of this we'll do virtually. We'll do this kind of thing, but it is not the same as being in the classroom or being in a gym or being in an auditorium or a lunchroom. But that's okay. We'll make it fly. You just work with what you got. All right, Bill, I'm delighted we're on Zoom tonight.
I knew you would be. I'm so glad.
Oh, my heart is warm.
I'm so happy.
To do the Google Meet thing, you have to use two computers. And so I actually did some work today on this old Mac Mini in here. And I think you stream it like on this production machine. I just do Google Meet. That's all I do. You take that old computer, take Google Meet, and then you use OBS. I can't use Wirecast. You have to have 2 different licenses for 2 computers, but I'll use OBS, stream it to YouTube, and do a screen capture that way. And I think that will work. That's about the only way to make that work right, because I've got to have this one to have the audio routed correctly.
Well, we'll definitely have to do it next week.
And the last time I looked at Google Meet, there was some funkiness involving virtual cameras, but I think that's okay, because here I don't need a virtual camera. I just use the camera as it is. As long as the virtual audio pipes can be put in there, and I think they can. So I think we're okay.
Good.
But we'll make it work, whatever. That's what we do here.
You're the master.
I'm just a stooge. So, yeah, I thought I'd ring us up early today. I don't know why. Everything was in disarray, so I thought I'd just be sure that everything is okay, and I think it is.
It's going to be a long show tonight, so that's good.
Yeah, I've got Jen's.
This week in
because we'll probably do a recorded segment right around as soon
WeatherBrains
as we talk about the NWA, James, around 8:25, and then we'll do Bruce, and then we'll talk to. Then we'll do the main discussion.
Okay,
Tony, and then we'll
put the stuff in the chat, and I'll get it. I
invited Bruce early, so Bruce can just sit in with us on the first part. There he is.
It's an honor to have Bruce early. he adds a degree of intelligence and class to this pre-show segment, which we desperately need. And I think I got Tony's in here. Yeah, I think we're good. Christmas.
Had a good
Before you know it,
test
it'll be
with-
Christmas.
I can't believe it. Yeah, I had a good test with Greg, but his audio was a little low, James. So you may want to listen. Make sure that
Okay.
it's loud enough. Mm.
No, I think we're good. For some reason, I was just, I was thinking next week was tonight, and I had to be sure. I don't want to screw this one up. So I got in here kind of early and started tinkering around with a dual computer setup, and I think it's going to work. The only thing I don't know is, Bruce just hung up on us.
And Bruce went away.
Yeah, no, it's not.
He finally
That's
got
the
smart.
sign of intelligence. A very intelligent man. He saw
were
this,
right.
heard this, he ran. He's out of here. No, I think I've got this thing figured out. All right, he's coming back. So Jen is out, but I've got her recorded segment. And hopefully everybody else is in.
Hope so.
So our NBC had a bunch of layoffs. Hope Nate didn't lose any of his weather people.
No.
This is a tough time in our biz. We were all just hanging on by thin ice here. I just open the trades every morning expecting to see layoffs in my company, but so far,
A lot of political dollars still, aren't there?
I don't know. I think it depends on the market that you're in. We benefited from a few races here.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what's going to happen.
All right, we got Greg coming in here.
It's good.
And we got Aubrey coming in here. I can just see them lining up.
Like planes lining up over
Yeah.
O'Hare.
We got Aubrey on the line. Got some
Hi, guys.
refreshing
Hello.
Hi,
air.
Greg.
Hello. Yeah.
Hi,
Good
Bruce.
evening,
How are you?
everyone.
Hey, Greg, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Fantastic.
Okay.
Hi,
Good.
Greg.
Hey, almost said good morning. What's going on with me?
Greg, what's on your mind? Ooh, we got Alan on here now.
Ooh.
We got so much brain power on this show that I just need to soak it all in.
It's a brain soak.
If I could only just think about all the intelligent people we've had on this show over the years, really smart people. If only I could.
Enjoy that.
No, we need to,
Alan,
we
you
need to do
okay?
a quick inventory, make sure we haven't had, because there's somebody somewhere along the way we haven't.
Alan, can you hear us okay?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Am I muted?
Mhm.
No, you're
You're
You are
good.
loud and clear.
Awesome.
And here comes Todd. So the gang is almost all here. We're going to start on time tonight.
Oh, hello, Todd.
Todd is connecting to audio.
If we get Nate, we'll have 3 Presidentes.
Ooh,
Yeah.
not one, not two.
But
That could be a show title.
Is that like the
Exactly.
Chili's margarita, the Presidentes?
Yeah, Tres Presidentes.
that's a pretty good margarita.
Yes, it is. It's all about the sour mix.
Yeah. They do a
Gotta
good
have-
job
Well, you
with
should
that.
you should share, Aubrey. Like put the
We
I mean,
should
I
do
could-
we should bartender brains one week.
I mean, next NWA, I'll make them for you guys.
Well,
I'll
there's
bring-
a virtual
I'll bring the
NWA
shaker.
coming up.
That's true.
Uh-oh, Bruce says he can't hear the audio. That's not good. He's muted too. Check your audio
Uh-oh.
setting, Bruce. Look at the little microphone down there. Click that up
Does it look-
arrow. See if maybe it's gotten on some wacky setting.
Here comes number 3, and here comes Kim.
Wow,
So
we got a full
everybody's
house.
here. Everybody but Jen.
Exciting. Gotta make notes here because I have to keep up with who's on the show these days. All right, James. Aubrey.
All right. Well, we can just start this thing here in 60 seconds.
I bet Troy will come in on 2 wheels in a minute. What do you bet?
Yeah, he should. He's the only missing party here.
This is a
He
famous
typically-
anniversary day today, too.
Camille.
What's Nate showing off here? Oh, yeah, there you go.
Oh.
He's gearing up. It's going into the meat of the tropical season. We can talk extreme heat, firenadoes, and
We're
We've had a lot going on.
we're going into the meat of the hurricane season after the K storm.
yeah.
At the rate we're going, we're going to need a new alphabet at the
Well,
end.
how do we pronounce the L storm?
Yeah.
Nate?
So
Hoorah.
wait, time out.
Laura.
Let's hold that for the show. Let's hold it because
Okay, yeah.
this is an important topic. I don't want this to be missed.
we all said the ice storm correctly because of you, Nate.
You're welcome.
Isa is.
Most of us did. There were a few people who didn't.
Boy, some of that. Who sent that audio? The air traffic control audio.
That guy
was
had a problem
funny.
with it.
That was
don't,
funny.
If I got it right, it's because I have great colleagues who kept me in check. But
All right, let's get this thing started. We are at the top of the hour, and hopefully Troy will be here in a moment. In fact, there he is. So now we can officially start this show. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains episode number 761, the weekly show all about weather. And you know what? I blew it. Stand by. Let's do a restart. Hit the wrong button. Here we go. In JP, the wrong false start. Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
WeatherBrains is brought to you by the great folks at Midland Weather Radio. Every home, school, and business should have a NOAA Weather Radio, the official voice of the National Weather Service.
And this is WeatherBrains episode number 761. WeatherBrains is the weekly show all about weather, the longest running weather podcast in the universe. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we've got a good show tonight. Got a big crowd. It's going to be good. Troy, you just wheeled in. You just came right in here as the show started. So what's on your mind?
You never fail to impress me, James Spann. I mean, you do. You're just amazing. I mean, it's so professional.
Oh, please. Now you're mocking me.
I mean, it's like I've known you for years.
So we'll talk about Camille later.
Yeah.
But this is a big anniversary. We're doing the show. This is for August 17th, anniversary of Camille, 51 years. Troy and I are very few people on this show are old enough to remember, Troy. We might be it.
Oh, I remember it.
Yeah,
It was,
Bill, if either one of us
try to
keel
weather.
over during the show, just
I'll
make sure we
carry
get the
banner.
recognition we deserve. Yeah.
But let's go right to Nate. You know, Nate got us saying the ice storm properly. So, Nate, we have an L storm coming up. How do you say this one?
Laura.
It's that simple. People are trying to make it a lot more complicated, Nate. You're misleading us.
NHC guide, it says Lura.
Laura. Yeah, that's wrong. It's Laura.
It's
I
the
think
L storm.
That's the differentiate. That's, I think, to differentiate it from the Dr. Zhivago and Lara, Lara. This is just, it's Laura with a U, or the L storm if you prefer. But
I'll go for the L storm.
may it be
I'm
a
so
so
confused.
storm that we don't have to talk about.
Yes.
I'm so
I don't think
confused.
that's going to happen.
So Laura, Marco, and of course we need Polo, but that's not happening.
Well, don't
Nate?
forget, you've got
Wait.
Nana at the bottom of that middle column there.
With
Now,
Teddy.
whose smart idea was that?
Right.
For
Hurricane Nana.
for people in the deep South, Nana brings back memories of your grandmama that's going to put a piece of wood to your backside.
Yeah, that
having to
time
go pick your own
Time
switch,
Yeah.
and then having to go back out and pick another one when the first one you got
Yeah.
wasn't good enough.
My God, yes.
Broke in the first punishment.
So, Kim, it's great to see you. How are you doing in Norman, Oklahoma?
Doing wonderfully. Just, baking like all of us in the South Central Plains are. But given the other things going on across the country, who can complain? I mean, gosh, I have had a bunch of friends contact me who are out in California, and they've been asking me about the tornado warning for the fire. And is this normal? Is this something that ever happens? They're broiling and they're out of power. They're rolling blackouts for the first time in a significant amount of time, and what a terrible time for it. So, it's hot here. It's been really humid, and it just the above 70s dew points have just got to end. But I am not going to complain, all things considered. We've got it pretty good compared to other places.
When you
So
said you were
speaking of that,
baking, I
let's-
thought you were going to say you were making sourdough, Kim. So
I never did get on the bread train. I know that's been a really big thing for the pandemic for many, but I can't say that I've baked a single thing this whole time.
So we've got baking going on in Norman. So, Aubrey, how refreshing will it be there tonight in Virginia?
Oh, I'm going mid to upper 50s for tonight.
what's your dew point,
Beautiful.
Aubrey? What's your dew point?
It dropped to 51. It was 60
my
when I
goodness.
came in at 2.
We got 63 and I thought we were good.
I need you to send me some of that, like now.
It was so refreshing last night. I sat out. My nieces were in town this weekend. We had a little fire pit fire last night, and I put leggings on and a sweatshirt.
Ooh, fall will be here before you
Wow,
know it.
fantastic.
Pumpkin spice it's almost here. It's almost here.
Actually, pumpkin
But-
spice is here. I think I saw somewhere that the two major manufacturers of that are selling it as of today.
Yeah, because they put it out in
Ah.
August, and then everyone runs out by October 1st.
It's
You know,
just
I was in a
ice cream.
place they've got Christmas out in some stores now.
Mm.
So, it never stops. But Bill, bring in our guests before they bail on us. I'm excited about this show. We got a lot of very smart people here.
Yeah, James. Tonight's primary guest, WeatherBrain, is the suggestion of our August guest booking officer, Jay Farlow. He's been responsible for the whole month. But tonight's primary guest, WeatherBrain, is the Severe Weather Services Program Leader for the National Weather Service, Greg Shore. Welcome to WeatherBrains. And it's good to have you. Coming to us from where tonight, Greg?
Norman.
So Norman, we've got what? 3
How many-
from Norman? Is that
Yeah.
right? Wow. Yeah. Okay. We've got Norman bingo tonight. So that's good. But it's good to
Bingo.
have you here. Now, as I warned you, we're going to talk NWA for a few minutes, Greg. So we're going to make you into a panelist here for a few minutes. So make sure you heckle. Make sure you heckle our other guests for a few minutes before we
Got
get
my
you on.
list.
Good. So it's good to have you here tonight, though. But first, I want to introduce our friend of the show and our sponsor, Bruce Jones. Bruce, can you hear us okay? Can we hear you?
Maybe not.
There we go. Sorry.
There we go, Bruce. We got you
now.
early
Yes.
tonight
Yes.
because we've got a lot of things to talk about with a little bit of weather radio angle. So we brought you in early. So it's good to have you here tonight. So
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, with that big derecho moving across Iowa and then over into Illinois and Indiana, that's kind of event that can catch people off guard, believe it or not. We in the weather business think, oh, you could see that coming a mile away. But it's interesting. The mayor of Cedar Rapids was complaining that she only got 10 minutes advance warning. So, it's easy to get out of touch with what's going on around you. It's really easy.
yes, it is. So we're going to talk to you at the bottom of this hour in just a few minutes about some weather history and some weather future and how weather radio plays and all that. Thank you for being here tonight.
Appreciate being here. Thank you.
But tonight's special brains are both friends of the show. First, we welcome the MIC, the National Weather Service in Las Vegas. He's the president of the National Weather Association. So we've got the current president and the president-elect all here in one fell swoop. And we've also got the president of the National Weather Association Foundation, Alan Gerard, Todd Laricos, Nate Johnson, all here. Nate's with us every week. Good to have these other guys. But Todd, you had 130 degrees in Death Valley out there close to where you are today. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it was yesterday actually.
Was it
127
yesterday? Okay.
today. Yeah.
120, only 127 today. So that's
Yeah, that's right. Only 127. So I am baking bread. I just throw it out on the patio for about 15 minutes and I'm good to go after that. So
yes.
Hey, 130 degrees is good for a medium rare steak. So
I feel like one. So yeah, it's been an interesting couple of days. Climate Extremes Committee's gearing up, the whole 9 yards. So it's a pretty historic temperature. So it's been a busy day, but glad to be here. Sorry for the intrusion, Greg, but if you heckle anybody, make sure it's Alan, okay?
And Alan, we saw on Facebook that you came down with the old COVID. How did you come through it? Give us a.
Came through it pretty well. No major issues, thankfully. So I had symptoms, but nothing major. So luckily on the road to recovery, I think. So
well, I tell you, it always gets our attention whenever we see that. So we're thankful that you're better and well, and everyone in your family's okay. No one else came down with it.
Nobody else got it. Just lucky me.
All right. So Alan and Todd, we're having to go virtual this year. So Todd, what does a virtual, and Nate, you too, what does a virtual NWA look like, an annual meeting?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, right? So we've been having to kind of design this and really kind of organize it on the fly. We really only made the decision to go virtual sometime in June, but we were kind of talking about it before then. I think what people will see generally is a more compact conference. It's not going to be as long because we just can't sit in front of a computer as long as we would normally interact in an in-person type of conference where we have side conversations going on till 5 and then happy hours in the evenings, things like that. So, we have to make it a little bit more compact. And because it's more compact, I think it's more action-packed in that particular perspective. I think it's going to be fast-paced. It's really going to take place over 3 core days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of that week. But there'll be some activities on Monday and Sunday as well. For things like master class, the introduction ceremonies, Greg Carvin's talk, things of that nature that we normally kind of handle sometimes in the evenings and the breaks during the week. But that core 3 days, Tuesday through Thursday, we think we really have a decent lineup. So the steering committee has done a fantastic job of really kind of focusing everything. Got a heck of a slate of keynotes and speakers and things of that nature. So
that's a good time to talk about those keynotes. Who are the keynotes this year?
Yeah, so we're going to mix it up a little bit this year. We're going to kind of bring some people outside of our career field in, and they're relevant. They're relevant to my theme. If you'll remember, it was Forward Together, Meeting the Challenges of Operational Meteorology in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, Analytics, and Digital Communication. And so what we tried to really do is put keynotes on each of those 3 days that kind of address those 3 sub-themes in there. First up is Dr. Avi Goldfarb, who's an economist of all things from the Rotman School of Economics at the University of Toronto. He wrote a book called Prediction Machines. I mentioned this in my president's address this month. If you haven't read this book as a meteorologist or even as an allied career field in meteorology, you need to read it. I couldn't put it down. It was fantastic. I read it cover to cover. And Avi works with companies like Microsoft and Amazon, and he works on how they're infusing artificial intelligence and prediction into their workflows and into their strategies. And I think there's a lot that he deals with that we can kind of bring to bear on the field of meteorology. We can talk a little bit more about that if we want, but it's going to be a really interesting talk. Of course, the second headliner is Dr. Florence Rabier from the ECMWF, which I think is going to be a fantastic talk. She's going to talk a little bit about things that are going on in ECMWF in these arenas. And then on Thursday, another all-star, Dr. Desiree Hill, who many of the broadcasters probably know, is an expert in journalism and crisis communication, to kind of talk a little bit about how digital communications are really affecting the branches in our particular career. So it's just bang, bang, bang. 1, 2, 3. They're going to be really interesting talks. I'm going to be glued to them.
So Todd, when will they release the agenda? When will we see the?
We're close. Probably within, I don't want to tie them down, but probably within a week or two. I think they're just putting the final touches on some of that, getting with the company that's going to be running the mechanics of it, the IT side of it, and then it'll be released shortly.
And so you mentioned your theme. I'm glad you said that because I wanted to ask you I want you to tell us what that was again. But all of this presentations are going to be virtual. All the speakers are going to be available to us as part of the registration. Is that right?
Yeah. The interesting thing about this year, I think, is yes, it is all virtual, to answer your question, Bill. And you'll be able to watch it online. Those who pay for admission into the annual meeting this year will have access to everything that we do in a virtual setting. The interesting part, and something that we've never had in the past, is you'll be able to go back and view all of that information after you get away. So if any of you are like me, right, you get home and you're like, I wish I could have caught that presentation, or I wish I could rewatch a particular presentation that I thought was really useful or interesting. You really can't do that. So here we're going to have an archive. You'll be able to go back and take a look at all of that. And that's much of that is actually going to be put into a learning management system eventually down the road to be able to kind of be a resource and build a library of resources for our members, which I think is really cool. So I think we're really going to see some sort of virtualization now, probably, into the future. I think every annual meeting, whether it's in person or not, it's probably going to have some sort of virtual component. I don't think we're going to go backwards in that regard, right, Nate?
I was just going to go to Nate, Todd. I was going to ask Nate. I think that's a good thing.
Segue.
I think that opens it up for so many.
Well, I think we've learned a lot, and we're still learning a lot. I mean, this whole COVID thing, doing work from home, and all of this, it's a forced experiment in so many ways, right? The NWA meeting is going to be completely virtual. AMS annual meeting in New Orleans in January, also a large virtual component at this point. And we're going to learn a lot about this. Some of it's going to work. Some of it's maybe not going to work, and that's okay. But I think one thing that I think the NWA especially has done, and I've been really appreciative of Todd's leadership and the leadership of the group that's really organizing the annual meeting this year, in that as soon as we said we're making it virtual, they said, all right, we're on it, we're excited, and not only are we going to make this the best virtual meeting, but we're going to shoot to make it the best annual meeting we've ever had. And I think that attitude, just that approach on this is going to make all the difference. It's like, fine, we're here, we're going to do it. We're going to do this to the nines, and we're going to see what we can do. And, like I said, I don't think anybody, it would be better if we could be in person. I hope, next year that we are able to be in person in Tulsa. But, for the meantime, we're going to do it as well as we can, and we're going to learn some things. And to Todd's point, I think there are going to be some elements of this that are going to carry over even when we're able to get back in person again.
So who are the program chairs this year? Because they always deserve a tremendous amount of credit, and we need to make sure they get that credit this year for sure. Who are they this time?
Well, there's lots of people involved. And now we've actually have the steering committee, and then we have an ad hoc that is handling some of the other stuff. So I can't name them all. We'll be here all night, right? But
like the Academy Awards, we'll start playing the music and shut you down, Todd.
So Matt Alto from AccuWeather and Cindy Elsenheimer are the two program chairs. Cindy had to take some leave, and so Wendy Sellers, who is next year's chair, has kind of come in and taken over some of Cindy's duties temporarily while she's gone to help Matt out. And so those are the two that are leading that team and really doing a heroic job. They're and headquarters staff too. I mean, they're so underappreciated. So Bryce, Nicole, Janice, all of them are just really just buried in stuff, but just keep producing and getting things done. And so we're appreciative of them. If this is going to be the success that I know it's going to be, it's going to be due largely to their efforts for sure.
That's just outstanding. So this always a huge part of this is the social aspect. Have you been able, Nate and Todd, to bake in that aspect of it into the computer platform that we'll be utilizing, or is that just still too far in the future to do something?
We're still ironing some of that stuff out, but yes, that's a big intent and a big goal of this, And if you look at what we've been doing with the distant socials over the last few months, where you sort of open up a platform, let people get together, talk about whatever. Some of those have been themes, some of them have been sort of open. That I think is a glimpse at what we're trying to do with some of these socials that we're going to try to do through the course of the meeting, especially on Monday. There'll be some icebreaker networking type things on Monday. But that's the goal, is to try and capture as much of that social piece. Because as Todd said, I mean, the watching talks, I mean, there's something, to be said for being in the room, right? Being able to ask questions, to be able to get the read on how other people are reacting to talks, especially the ones that can be a little controversial. We've had a few of those at NWA in years past, but you can really capture the meat of what's being said in a recording after the fact. But it's a lot of those serendipitous conversations that happen in the hallway, to and from lunch, or who you sit next to at the banquet or what have you. Those are the kinds of things that we're having to work really hard to replicate in a virtual setting, but by golly, we're going to try.
Outstanding. So I imagine the awards ceremony will be done as usual and virtual this time.
We're going to change that up a little bit. It's not set in stone yet, so I don't want to kind of announce it get out ahead of the headlights here. But we're going to try something a little different with the awards. Yes, they will be presented though, and the people who win are certainly going to get their chance in the spotlight here during that core 3 days that we were talking about there.
And lastly, the posters are always such a huge part of it. Will there be poster presentations? Are those still part of it in this go round, or
yeah,
not?
Yeah, they are. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Nate. You're more read in on this one, so go for it.
Well, yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, because this year, instead of the posters just being posters, they're actually going to be very short, sort of lightning talks, right? So 5 minutes. I'm actually giving a poster with Tony Rice. And giving another poster with Sean Sublett from Climate Central. And those will be 5-minute talks that can have slides and everything else. And so it's more of a short oral presentation than it is sort of a traditional poster presentation. But we're trying to, again, build in that opportunity for people to ask questions about the poster or the content. That, I think, is something that we may be able to do more effectively in a virtual platform, is with both the oral talks, the traditional sort of 12 to 15 minute critters, and the poster talks, to be able to do these in a way that allow people to interact with the speaker more directly, to ask more questions, to ask perhaps more detailed questions than they might be able to get at, and to try and take one of the advantages of a really good poster session is that one-on-one time. If I'm really passionate about something, I can sit down and I can talk with the poster presenter about it. Other people can chime in and that sort of thing. And this is something that we're trying to bake into not only the poster talks, but also the oral presentations for this year. And this may be something that carries over into future years.
All right, last question. El Presidente number 1, Todd, will I get my CEU credits for attending this year?
Yes, I believe, yes, you will. So that's being ironed out. I don't know if that's been released yet, Nate, or not. I haven't been.
It's been James Paul Dice anyway has posted about for broadcasters that yes, the CEUs will be the same. That the broadcaster day will be sort of its own thing, and then the 3 days of the conference. So yeah, the CEUs. If you register for the whole thing, attend the whole thing, you get all the same CEUs as last year. And I think that again speaks to Todd's point about it's going to be a tighter, more compact, but probably an even higher signal to noise ratio than we typically have with an NWA conference, which is already pretty good. So I think it's going to be like Todd said, an action-packed a few days. And yes, if you attend, you will get your CEUs.
And make sure all the other panelists have a chance to heckle or ask any questions before we get away. But that probably asks most of the questions that I've got. Is the broadcasters event on Sunday like it usually is, Nate, or is it?
Yes.
Okay,
along with the student events will be on Sunday.
So is there going to be some kind of virtual golf, Todd, or anything like that? Nothing like that.
That's not a bad idea, actually. I think
at the rate we're going with the number of pilots we have showing up at NWA these days, I think we could all buy a copy of Flight Simulator and take the new Flight Simulator that's coming out and actually do some group flights somewhere. That actually could be kind of fun.
Oh my goodness, a new Flight Simulator. That's breaking news right there, Nate. That's probably pretty important. Well, let's transition over to the foundation for a second. Alan, you're, of course, the president of the foundation, been around for several years now. Talk about the mission of the foundation and how it's going these days.
Well, the mission of the foundation is a little subtly different than the main National Weather Association. The foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit that is focused on the education and scholarship aspects of the NWA. So in other words, we're really focused on doing the raising money and doing the outreach and education of the public, and scholarships for like students. We also have a grant program for teachers to enable them to purchase equipment, weather equipment for their classes, or to purchase science equipment to do lessons about atmospheric science or hydrology or anything like that. So we're really focused on those programs near and dear to the NWA membership's heart that are focused on education and outreach.
And the important part is it becomes tax deductible, the contributions that people make, because it was set up separately under the tax auspices so that it could be done so. And part of that is, one of those is fundraising. And Ken Carey in 2016, we just had Ken on the show a few weeks ago. It was so good to see Ken and to talk to him extensively.
Great that he's doing well.
And to hear and to see him in person doing well.
Yeah.
He was so adamant in Norfolk that we were going to do a weather fest. And we did, and it was thrown together. Well, not really thrown together. A lot of work went into that, but it still was, it was a new effort. And every year it's, gotten bigger and better, and lots of cool things have happened. St. Louis was fantastic, obviously. Huntsville last year was great. And it's become a nice fundraiser for the foundation. So this year I was quite bummed. Alan, in February and March when it just looked impossible. And, when I came back to you and Gail and said, I just don't see how, and Henry and said, I just don't see how we're going to be able to do this year. And you took lemons at that point and turned them into lemonade and said, let's do a virtual weather fest. People like James were already doing, they were already transitioning to do their school talks virtually. And you said, we need to do the same thing. So talk about how that has evolved and what's going to happen with the virtual Weather Ready Fest in September.
Yeah, like you said, Bill, folks like James and other broadcasters around the country have really been on the leading edge of doing school talks and outreach, to the public, to school kids around the country. That's been going on for many years. And obviously with the coronavirus outbreak, James and others have pioneered doing this more virtually, because we don't want to lose the opportunity to interact with students and get weather safety and weather education out there. So when we realized that we weren't going to be able to do Weather Ready Fest in the traditional way that we've done it the last several years, having a big event on Saturday at a science museum or some other facility in the town where we're having the NWA annual meeting, those of us who are on the Weather Ready Fest committee, of which Bill is the lead of, I want to make sure we give credit where credit's due here. We discussed doing it virtually, primarily with the idea of needing to, like I said, the NWA Foundation, our mission is really education and outreach. And one of the things that's really driving this is the idea that you've got a lot of kids now doing school virtually from home. Parents need content. They need lessons. They need things that they can show their kids to keep them engaged and learning about a wide variety of topics, but obviously science, meteorology, hydrology, all the things that we do in our community are a great way to engage kids in the sciences and teach them about a whole variety of, math, science, the list goes on. So essentially, we decided that we were going to do what we could to make the Weather Ready Fest a virtual event. So we've been working to get a website up, and starting hopefully here in the next couple of weeks, it will be live with content. James has graciously agreed to provide some of the content. We have a number of broadcasters and other entities. We're looking for National Weather Service offices, whoever has content that they'd like to share with the community. We're happy to make that happen. So not only will we be doing have this virtual website, which will serve as a resource for folks, not just, that's one of the advantages, again, like Todd was talking about with the annual meeting. This won't go away when the day of Weather Ready Fest comes and goes. It will be out there as a resource, forever. So that's one of the things we're really excited about. And we're also raising money for the NWA Foundation, because we've gotten some great sponsors on board, some groups that have sponsored us in the past at our in-person Weather Ready Fest are going to be sponsoring us again on our virtual Weather Ready Fest. So we're very excited about that, and we're excited to get it up and live.
Yeah, I'm excited because USAA will be, as you referred to there, will be the title sponsor. FedEx is sponsoring us, Comet. James, someone you're familiar with, Alabama 811, Michelle Dory, a big supporter of what we do locally here in Alabama. They're going to support us. So these are all great sponsors, and going to be a huge part of what we do. Because at the end of the day, that's what we want to do, is raise money for scholarships and grants like you were talking about. And James has agreed to do a live presentation on the 9th and the 22nd, because every day in the month of September, every weekday except for Labor Day, we're going to feature live. We're going to feature at least recorded or live talks during that time. I'm pleased to announce tonight that Ginger Z is on board to do a talk for us. She's official. Brian Norcross is on and official. James Adelot out of Tulsa, his station was already lined up to, help us. And we had a fantasy meteorologist draft. You have fantasy football drafts, Troy, and fantasy baseball drafts. We had a fantasy meteorologist draft last Thursday, and all of the committee members, came up with people they could go after. So if you haven't heard from us, you will soon. And if you don't hear from us, don't get your feelings hurt. Call us anyway. Because, Alan, we need everybody that we can get, because the more the merrier. Because I really do think this is going to be, again, like Nate said earlier and what Todd said, this is going to have a lasting impact in the future, the virtual component of this.
Absolutely. And one of my draft picks, Betsy Kling and her team at WKYC in Cleveland have agreed to not only provide some recordings, but they're willing to do some live presentations for us as well. And I'll just finish by saying I actually spent quite a bit of time last night reviewing proposals, applications that teachers have submitted for the Saul Hirsch grant, which is the grant that we give out each year to several teachers around the country, like I said, to buy equipment or supplies for their classrooms, to develop weather-related education programs in their community or in their school. And it always just really excites me reading those, how many talented teachers we have out there, and being able to raise money enables us to be able to support that kind of work. And that's the important thing that the NWA Foundation does.
No question about it. This is an awfully NWA-centric start, James, but I know we want to transition here for a minute, and I hope Todd and Alan will stick around for a while for tonight, because we want to make sure we talk to them as long as they can. But James, why don't you transition us, and we'll come back in just a minute and talk about some other stuff.
Yeah, if there was something like this when I was a kid, I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, people of my generation, we could only dream of hearing these speakers in this kind of weather content for kids that love weather. It's just this is a smorgasbord. So I want to thank all of you for helping to put this together, and I'm very excited. So let's take a quick break, and we will be right back with much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
The moon reaches new phase on Tuesday night. New moons are coveted by astronomers because, unlike full moons, they don't fill the night sky with light that blocks out fainter, more interesting objects. This week's new moon is also known as a black moon. While a blue moon is the second full moon in a calendar month, a black moon is usually the second new moon in a calendar month. However, that same moniker has also been used to describe the third new moon in a season, which is where we find ourselves this week. Confused? Yeah, me too. These calendrical coincidences are interesting, I suppose, but anything highlighting a new moon doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Don't go looking for that new moon. This first lunar phase occurs when the moon is lined up with the sun. So it's invisible to us, not only because only the far side is illuminated, but also because the moon gets lost in the sun's glare. And that's why solar eclipses can only occur at new moons. Elsewhere in the sky, look for the bright star Spica this weekend. It's visible in the west after dark and will be joined by a thin waxing crescent moon. That light took over 250 years to make it here. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
So Nate Johnson.
This week in tornado history, we are going way back to August 19th of 1890 to a significant event in northeastern Pennsylvania. Two tornadoes moved through parts of Luzerne County. The first actually began in Columbia County in the northern part of Greenwood Valley. It would travel 25 miles, ending 2 miles southwest of Lehman Center in Luzerne County. Along its path, it would cause major destruction, and based on documentation of the damage, an F3 rating has been assigned by the National Weather Service Binghamton. Homes were leveled near Benton, and the town of Harveyville was nearly completely destroyed. Eyewitnesses in one area described the tornado as, quote, a silvery color, and seemed like a stream pouring down into the darker mass of clouds at the earth. Sadly, 4 were killed by this violent twister and more than 10 injured. As this tornado dissipated, a new one formed 6 miles to the south. It began about 1.7 miles west of Nanticoke. It followed the Susquehanna River to the east and northeast to Corncrest and then veered northeast into Wilkes-Barre. Roofs were seen being lifted into the air. 5 passenger train cars were thrown onto their sides. The damage in town suggests that the tornado had multiple vortices. Strong, well-built brick structures were leveled, while weak frame buildings beside them were left untouched. Over 400 buildings were damaged or destroyed in the Wilkes-Barre area. Tragically, 16 were killed and over 60 injured. It is interesting to read newspaper accounts of these events from the 1800s, as they have a tendency to share some very odd, possibly exaggerated accounts. One such account was that on South Canal Street, a woman who was caught outside when the tornado struck was supposedly stripped of all of her clothes. She reportedly, quote, ran distressed into the nearest house. This entire event is documented in a brand new summary by Maine writer Nick Wilkes on our website at tornadotalk.com.
And I'm sorry about breaking in there. I thought we were going to save Jen for later in the show. Sorry about that, James. But Nate, I don't know. Maybe you communicate with Tony a little more than we do. What's a calendrical coincidence? Is anybody familiar with that?
Calendrical is in a calendar.
I gotcha. Okay, this is a weird year for calendrical coincidences.
Well, just stop
for sure.
right there. It's just a weird year. You could just put the period right there. You don't need anything else. I think we can all agree.
There is no question about that. But it is a perfect storm tonight because we have an opportunity to talk to 2 people that we have wanted to talk to with Bruce about NOAA Weather Radio tonight. So it's sort of a perfect storm, and it kind of fits in with the whole 2020 thing. But Bruce, it is welcome you back in here for a minute to talk about NOAA Weather Radio. And I always tell the story because when we started talking about you being a sponsor of the show, I wanted you to come up with a cool tagline and some neat stuff to promote, Midland. And you said, Bill, if somebody goes to buy a weather radio, there's a really good chance they're going to buy a Midland weather radio. So I want to come on and talk about this national treasure that we have that is NOAA Weather Radio. So tonight I wanted to give you a chance to, because 2 things you mentioned to me and they just happen to come together on the show tonight. One is the past, because I grew up listening to weather radio. So did James, KH54 in Birmingham. Our very own, the late, great JB Elliott used to go live all the time. And that was really, we knew it was important when JB went live. And we've got somebody else on this show tonight that's gone live before. So why don't you introduce that?
Yeah, Alan Gerard, the National Weather Service office in Jackson, Mississippi during the Yazoo, Mississippi tornado, went live on NOAA Weather Radio for an extended period of time. How long were you guys live, Alan?
Oh, off and on for probably 60 to 90 minutes. That was primarily Ariel Cohen, who is now the meteorologist in charge of the Pueblo NWS office. He was on that day, and we had done a lot of work to have some ability to go on live in the event of a tornado emergency type situation. And when that tornado did what it was doing, Ariel got us going live.
The interesting thing about NOAA Weather Radio, unlike commercial radio stations where you have a request line and people call in all the time and you know that people are actually listening because you get the calls on the request line. With NOAA Weather Radio, there's no request line. So you guys don't really know how many people are listening until you do something like this. And I'm sure you guys got an incredible amount of feedback on that day.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we got a lot of feedback. One of the things that I always think is interesting, and I don't know if Kim might have some comment on this as a social scientist of our group here, but we got a lot of feedback, not only from the weather radio broadcast that day, but just from some of the other ways in which we communicate with emergency managers and law enforcement about the tone of voice and being able to hear in the meteorologists, intonation and the way that they were, talking about the tornado, the kind of heightened concern. And that's something, you don't always get, from a recording. I mean, it's something a little different. So, yeah, we definitely got a lot of feedback from that and some other events. Unfortunately, we had a lot of big tornado events in that 2010, 2011 time period. So we had lots of practice.
Well, I always appreciated the live voice. I understand, the situation now is a lot of National Weather Service officers are running 8, 10, 12, sometimes 13 transmitters out of one office. And, you can't do live voice on 13 transmitters. So I certainly understand, but I also appreciate, because like you said, the computerized voice can impart information. The human voice can impart something a lot more. Yeah. And, I think during those times where it's a truly big event, I'm glad you guys still have a microphone there at the console or at the AWIPS. That's nice to have.
And I know a lot of offices still use it, in, big events where, they really need to convey the sense of urgency.
Yeah. And I think on a day-to-day basis, a lot of people don't listen to NOAA Weather Radio, but they have it there as their warning device. And when that warning goes off, they certainly do listen to that. But day to day, I know the agriculture industry, a lot of farmers, a lot of ranchers, they listen to it day to day, truckers day to day. But the average person has a weather radio and kind of leaves it sitting over there and just waits for it to go off. So Todd Laricos is also on. And Todd, I don't want to put you on the spot, but we do
put him on the spot.
National Weather Service has a little test going on. So on weather radios, you can put in the SAME code. It's a 6-digit code, and every county has its own code. And the first digit is a 0. The first digit of that code is a 0. And the 0 stands for entire county. So that when they issue a tornado warning for anywhere in the county, they set off that SAME code and all the radios in the county go off. But you could have a different digit there as the first digit. Instead of a 0, you could have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or a 9. We could actually partition our counties into as many as 9 sectors so that you could use a different SAME code. If I lived in the northwest corner of my county, I could put, instead of a 0, I could put a 1 in there. And the National Weather Service would be able to tell me, oh, this tornado is only in the northwest corner. So Todd Laricos and the National Weather Service office in Las Vegas are involved in a very important little test. And I don't know if you can reveal much about it, Todd, but I'd like to know a little bit about what's going on as you test partitioning that is subdividing Clark County, Nevada.
Sure. It's an interesting project, and one that I think is going to have some really cool effect on what we do in the future as far as partitioning counties. So just to kind of give you some perspective, it started here in Clark County, which Las Vegas is in. So for those that are watching back east can kind of conceptualize this a little bit. Because we were in a very large county, if we set off a flash flood warning in the south part of the county, it would of course alert for the entire county. And this would be the equivalent of putting out a warning for northern Delaware and alerting New York City. I mean, that's when you get to the size of the counties out west here. Now, obviously, the population underneath that is a lot less out here. But my point is that there's enormous geographic areas out here. And when you start setting off, the TV sets and the weather radios, and people are dealing with clear skies, which is how it happens out here, right? It's mostly sunny. And then you get these, in the monsoon, you get these isolated pulse storms that pop up and cause enormous flash flooding. So the warning is solid. The mechanism through weather radio is solid, but we're just alerting way too many people because of the size of the counties. So we decided to do something about that. We partnered with headquarters, and we're doing a little bit of a test. Now, we're not the first county to subdivide in the country. The difference here with this project is that we're trying to baseline a process to do that more easily. And so what we're hopeful is that if this is successful, and we're getting pretty close to getting the software packages that the Weather Service needs and everything else to be able to deal with these subdivisions, if you will, or partitions is what we like to call them in the counties, then the process we're documenting along the way, it'll become easier for the next counties that want to go. I mean, you look at some of the size of the counties in Arizona, California, those areas, I mean, they're just enormous. And so we're hopeful that this will make weather radio a lot more useful out in the West, where we have these large counties, and we were, clearly over alerting from an aerial perspective, but not for the weather itself. So I know Bruce has an interest in this. He's been a big supporter of it. We're getting pretty close, and we can't wait to see what the results are.
I just had a conversation today with Sonoma County, California. They're right up next to Napa County, and they were involved in some of the big fires in 2019. And they want to start using NOAA Weather Radio as a wildfire warning service because, that campfire, we had more than 80 fatalities. And those people were waiting to receive something on their cell phone. And I don't know what happened, but, a lot of people didn't get the wildfire warning. So we're getting information or getting interest from the counties in California to use this. But the most important thing is we're going to need to be able to subdivide those counties, because you don't want to issue an evacuation warning or wildfire warning for all of Sonoma County or all of Napa County and have the roads clogged with a bunch of cars so that the fire trucks can't get through to fight that fire. So it's going to be really important for wildfire fighting to make sure that we can partition these counties and get them smaller, get the warning smaller, so that we don't overload the highway system and just put people in the way of the firefighters. But thanks for the work you're doing. I'm excited about it myself.
It's a good chance to ask Greg a question. Greg, does that involve your aspect at all on the severe weather program side? Do you have to get involved in that at all and getting that information into the product, or is that all just totally with the software?
Yeah, the technical aspects of it, no. That's mostly the dissemination side of the house. There's a whole team of people that work with end users, partners, their own internal systems. But if it's, you use this product to set off an alert, maybe even wireless emergency alerts, that's a consideration. But dissemination does a lot of that stuff. So we just kind of work through the policies and make sure. So for instance, in order to do this partition, we need to try and put something in an IBW tag, an impact-based warning tag at the bottom, like we do for wind or hail or tornado. So that's what would set this off. So that's a policy change that goes into the text product itself. And then when you send it, does it work? So that's the coordination, collaboration we have, is making sure everyone does their part so that this can work.
Todd, talk just a second before we get away from this, but do you talk about how y'all are planning or how you are currently thinking about dividing the county? What's the project as it's set up right now? Is it along highways or rivers or just, geography? How are you doing it?
It's geographic based, and it's due in large part to some of the listening areas for our radio and our TV stations, believe it or not. So it's not just geography, because what we're finding with those warnings, pushing them out for the county, is that we were overloading the radio stations and the TV stations, right? Because they're broadcasting out to the entire county or to a small section of it, even though they're getting all the alerts for everywhere around it. So if you look at Clark County, it's kind of a square, maybe with the southwest corner kind of clipped out of it. But if you look at that as a square, it's kind of the center is Las Vegas, so that's its own segment. And then there are two segments up in the northern part of the county, a northwest and a northeast, and then a southern part as well. Southern and an eastern part as well. So I believe there's 5. I'd have to look because the map's been changed a few times. I'm working with the broadcasters, but it's been set, and it's now with our software people to try and make that all work so that when we draw our polygons, everything will click and we'll get the right code in there, as Bruce was talking about, to be able to do that. So that's what's taken the most time, by the way, is deciding on how that all needs to get done, because there are some really critical things you have to think about, right? I mean, do you want people warned in this particular area if a storm is here, even though it's on the other side of the line? And, so our forecasters will have to train to that too. So it's you say, oh, well, just draw the lines and move forward. Well, it's not quite that easy, as many of you here know, but just for the public's, perspective, is that there's a lot that goes into this. And so that's part of the reason why we want to kind of document this process so it becomes easier the second go around instead of just a one-off.
I have a quick question for you guys. You mentioned that subdivision is going on in other places, and I'm familiar with some efforts that are emergency management led to subdivide for other kinds of notification systems too. So, for example, siren systems. There are some county emergency managers that are moving to address the issue of having a large county and alerting them wholesale with sirens. Is there an effort underway to try to bridge what they're doing at their local levels, how they're subdividing with how Weather Radio will subdivide, so that all of these technologies are reflecting the same message to the same people?
Yeah, Bruce, you may be aware of that. We don't have sirens out here and things of that nature. So it's really primarily weather radios and TV and radio stations that are the primary users of that subdivision. But I imagine, I'm just kind of, extending it. If we were to kind of do this with larger counties that have a lot of sirens, then this could be applicable in the sense that they could just focus in on one partition of the county and not have to, look at those, putting those sirens off each time. Bruce, do you know of any that might benefit from that?
In my discussions with Silver Spring, they want to make sure that the National Weather Service and the county emergency managers are talking together about how do you subdivide a county. And like Bill said, do you divide it based on a road, a river? Do you divide it based on a watershed, so that you're just doing a flash flood warning for watershed A and it's not filtering over to watershed B? But as an example, Cook County, Chicago, Cook County has, I think, 6 million people living in that one county. So there's a perfect example of a place that could be subdivided and you'd stop over warning 6 million people. But that's going to have to be decided based on talks between National Weather Service and the county emergency managers. It's kind of a mutual decision.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how that all bears out, because I love the idea of getting geographically specific, but the idea of who gets to decide, there could be different people who have different visions for the reasoning behind lines being drawn one way or another. So I think it's a really interesting area. I hope all the systems will all go together, and love what you said. I think the way through is that everyone will work together to make those decisions jointly.
And Kim, like you said, as you know, it has to make sense to the end user.
Mm-hmm.
It has to be logical to the average Joe and Jane, and it has to make sense to them. If we can get it to make sense to them and also fulfill what National Weather Service and the county emergency manager want to do, then we're golden.
Yeah, interesting social science things kind of come up in here too, right? So like
Mhm.
early on, we said, well, let's just divide it along the highway, right? Well, when you make a highway a border, now you've just created a boatload of confusion, right? Because is that over here? Is that over there? Is it going to affect that highway? You know, that's in the
And all of
out
the
west.
weather, you know, everybody
Yes.
here in the East Coast knows that all the weather stops at I-95.
Yeah.
All the hurricanes stop there, and everybody west of 95, you're good to go. So I hear you on that one. I have a question, and I know this has come up before, but it seems like this is a really good time to ask. You know, it seems like we've gotten to a point where GPS chips are fairly cheap. We're transmitting GPS location with the warning text. All of that is going out in so many different ways. Is there a path forward for Weather Radio to begin integrating GPS capabilities so that there's no programming at all? You just say, I want for just my location, or I want for, you know, a little bit broader area, that kind of thing. Is that something that's in the works?
Well, it's interesting, Nate, when they wrote the SAME architecture in July of 1999, they included the opportunity for a nuclear power plant. If it had a radiological plume going downstream, the nuclear power plant could actually draw a polygon, and the polygonal coordinates, lat long, would be broadcasted as part of the SAME radio burst. That capability is still inside the SAME software. And I'm kind of pursuing it now, and I haven't gotten an answer back from the powers that be. But my question is, if this was written in to the code in 1999, the ability to put latitude and longitude points, the points of a polygon, into the NOAA Weather Radio burst. And as you said, we can now put a GPS chip and antenna in for about $2.35. Can put that inside a weather radio. I appreciate the partitioning of the counties. I think that's step one, but we've got to get to that polygonal warning. We've got to get that polygon broadcasted on NOAA Weather Radio. And the great thing about it, Nate, is NOAA Weather Radio, you can't make any changes to the system that would make current radios obsolete. That's kind of verboten. But I believe that based on the fact that this was all written into the SAME code since 1999, I believe that you could broadcast lat longitude coordinates of a polygon and it would not affect the current generation of weather radios that were out there. They would still go off the SAME code. But a weather radio that had a GPS chip inside of it, it would know whether or not it's inside that polygon. And that's the holy grail right there.
And by the time we get there, we'll have Fee, and Alan will mess everything up, and we'll be going in a whole different direction by then, right, Alan? But so, Bruce, you've got a special offer for WeatherBrains listeners, for people who love the show, people who hate the show, anybody who gets hold of that code.
Yeah, we got a special code, 15% off on weather radios and weather radio products. Just use the code SPAN15 at midlandusa.com. And somebody from work called me the other day and said, boy, we've gotten a lot of usage of this code. So thank you to those of you who are WeatherBrains fans for using this code at SPAN15, and you get 15% off your weather radio purchase. And again, the weather radios make great gifts. It's a great gift to give out. I used to take them and hand them out at the schools that I would go visit and so forth. I just believe that every home in the United States should have smoke detectors and a NOAA weather radio. And this is my 44th year. My 44th year of saying that.
So you started when you were 5, Bruce?
I did start when I was 5. Indeed, I did. Thank you, Bill. I just think they're really a no-brainer. And I know occasionally they're bothersome. They go off, they're kind of loud, but you know what? There are 19 people who lost their lives in Putnam County, Tennessee this year. And I'm sure if they had to do it all over again, they would have loved to have had a weather radio in their house on March 2nd.
And that crank radio there has about 1/3 of your emergency kit, isn't it, Bruce? It seems like.
Yeah, we designed those for hurricane evacuation zones. So you don't put an SAME code into that one, because if you're evacuating a hurricane, you have no idea what county you're in. You just need information. You're traveling, you're in a car, you're just in a caravan. You just want the information. But that has AM, FM, weather radio, flashlight, and then you can crank it and recharge and actually recharge your smartphone if your smartphone goes dead. So when you go to an evacuation center and you're there with a bunch of other people and your cell phone runs low on power, all the plug-ins are being used by other folks. You can actually generate your own electricity by cranking this radio. Just crank it up, generate your own electricity, charge your phone. That's 5 of the items that go in a Hurricane Go kit. And as hyperactive as this season might be, it's a good time right now to get ahead of the curve.
Well, hopefully we won't need it for Lura or Lyra or Laura or whatever Nate says we're going to call this next one, or Nana or Nana or whoever else is coming up. But Bruce, thank you for being here.
Here's my boring weather radio story, Bruce.
Good.
I was actually the top of the hour ID voice of weather radio in Birmingham for about 6 months. This would have been 1981 or 82. I mean, if you listen to weather radio, you would hear me. This is KIH 54 Birmingham, the voice of the National Weather Service.
Until Mike Hoyer complained.
Right, 6 months until the other station griped about it. and then it went back to the Weather Service guys. But that was my cheap thrill during the J.B. Elliott Weather Service era. He let me record those things. But
there's probably a file on you at headquarters because of that.
I'm sure we broke a lot of rules back in those days. But, sometimes you got to break a rule.
Now I know what we call the male voice, James. I'm putting it together.
Well, Bruce, thank you for being here tonight. And stick around. You're welcome to stay all the way to the end. We're just getting started, believe it or not.
I've got a postcard I've got to show you guys. It's a little bit of an antique.
All right, good. That's going to be save that for your pick of the week. Yep. Well, Greg, we just we pretty much used up an hour here. So I told you the show was going to go long tonight. So I could have let you stay a little longer with your son tonight and spend a little time with him. But we're glad you stuck around. You didn't heckle or needle or anything. You didn't bother any of the guest weather brains. What's the deal?
Called bad brain, I suppose. Just claim that. No, if you see a pixelated ghost, I apologize in advance. And don't make that the show title, I'm telling you.
Pixelated Ghost is a great show title.
It could happen.
Too late. So yeah, it's great to be on. Fantastic panel here, and glad to hear about NWA, NOAA Weather Radio. A lot of cool stuff happening. And I'm not familiar with the SPI thing you speak of.
I'm sorry. You call it phi, don't you?
Camera there. No.
So Greg, talk about your job for a second. Tell us what you do.
Greg is heckling me. So
I delivered. Greg Shore, National Weather Service Severe Weather Services Program Leader, and one of 11 program leads, all different weather elements, including aviation and space, tsunami, tropical, fire. 3 of us are remote. Me here, out in Boise, we've got the fire program, and down in Miami with the Hurricane Center, we've got the tropical program. And so we work with our policy team, which is made up of regional representatives from all 6 regions, and things come up like, I don't know, fire NATOs. We have to kind of go, all right, what's going on? How do we need to change? When you think of policy, I try to make policy fun. I try to make policy fun in terms of it's not just words. It's not just, something nobody wants to read. It's impactful. We need to have something that is guidance for our forecasters to follow, but also something that kind of makes the American public feel like they're invested in this too. Most people have smartphones or cell phones or some sort of instant device where they are their own decision-making vehicle, and we didn't really have that, a couple decades ago. So how do we need to maneuver our policy toward technology, toward understanding? So things that social scientists have to deal with. How do people understand language, colors, notions of consistency? So these are things that we work together, all the different service program teams, the regions, to work for the warning forecasters for the meteorologists at these warning weather forecast offices across the country, and make things, you know, consistent and best practices, so that policy can work for them and be fun. Yeah. So yes, policy is fun. It's fun. So.
Well, there's been so many sidebars tonight in the chat. We really need to share them with the audience because they've really been hilarious.
No, we don't. No. Bill, come on now.
Yeah, I guess future presidents of the NWA and current presidents and other people might
Presidents
be
of the
bothered by
foundation,
Yeah.
and weather service policy people.
Greg Shore gets a pay raise. That's what we've decided so far. So.
Yes.
So Greg, we had Eli Jackson just a few weeks ago, and he's talking about, you know, all of his efforts, and you know, we were talking about what a noble effort that is, and you know what he's undertaking. Does that keep you up at night? Is that exciting? Are y'all working hand in hand, or is it something that makes you get an extra roll of Rolaids every day before you go to work?
Why put words in my mouth? No, I have worked on this for actually many years. I've been a cohort, if you will, working on this, you know, bouncing off ideas, trying to give some visualizations to this. And other people have helped out in different ways. You've seen the periodic table of weather service elements. Somebody came out with that idea. I try to do that in my line of work too, is try to help visualize, you know, the story. So elevator speeches are great. 30-page documents are great. I do those all the time. Nobody wants to read those. But visualizations, and that makes a big impact. And so it's a hard problem. And for the beginning, we used Superstorm Sandy back in 2012, where you had layers and layers and layers of watches and warnings, and they're all sort of at different time scales and ranges, and they come on and off. And it's these patchwork quilts. You've got all these different colors, and if you put a little pin down on where your location is at, you would have 4 to 5, maybe 6 watches, warnings, or advisories in effect for you at the same time. Or maybe they're in effect, but one doesn't go in effect until tomorrow, and right? So your head's starting to implode. Okay, what is my threat? And those are pretty rare, but when they happen, you want the best thing to happen for the messaging, for what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to stay in my house, but I'm in a floodplain? So they're very complex issues. And I think that's the essence of hazard services. Or I'm sorry, hazard simplification, something else. So hazard simplification was meant really to go, okay, like I said, we're getting into a more modern era, whether it's technology, whether it's notional things, whether it's just try to keep it simple so that the best message gets forward. And that's how hazard simplification has gone. We the whole team has surveyed, Eli, Daniel Nagel, and others who have been with this project, have surveyed all across the country, all across different spectrums of the public and end users, and some of you probably contributed too, maybe some of the listeners as well. And it's become a community effort. And I think that's the fantastic thing about it, is a lot of people have become invested in it. And to where, now we have some actual things that might become policy. And I think that's the fun part about it. And so nothing keeps me up at night. I think these are fun things. Sometimes they take a while, but I think the best things that are most long-lasting, long-standing, are the ones that take the most thought. As long as you've got that goal in mind, even if you're a few years away from it, you just try to keep that in mind. We're aiming for that, and you need to pull all these things together over time to make it happen.
So that's talking about the future for sure. Talk about where we've come from, because a lot of us are weather history fans on here, and you've spent a lot of time looking at how the program has evolved over time. Talk about some of the big events in history that have shaped it and how they did that.
Absolutely. And I'm a huge weather historian. So I love to hear, 22 years ago, this happened and such. And it does remind you that weather was bad in the past. I was a forecaster at the NWS office in Sterling, and somebody from basically the Tidewater region called me and said, we just had the worst storm in history. And he said his age, it was up there. He said, I've been in this place for 45 years and it's never rained this hard. And I looked and it was about the weakest really storm. I mean, he was in a little bit of a downpour. There was no wind reported anywhere, but it probably rained very hard at his house. And, people have always said, from year to year, you'd get calls from the media. If it was a drought, if it was a winter storm coming up, and people would commonly say, this seems like it's about the worst storm that we've ever had. And so if you look back in weather history, you do realize, wow, there were some really big snowstorms. There were some really big tornado events. There were some really big, and so history can get lost. And so I have the perspective of understanding the 1974 outbreak, one of the biggest things ever, and it was for about 40 years. 9 years before that, it was the 65 outbreak. There were plenty of big tornadoes that hit in pretty rare spots in the 50s, Flint, Michigan, and Massachusetts, North Dakota. And so it's just a reminder that if you blink, all of a sudden a rare event will happen somewhere. And so I see my job as the policy leader is to think about Portland, Oregon, just as much as I do Northern Oklahoma, as much as I do Brownsville, Texas, Key West, Florida. Every office in the country I see is equal because they could have their career event, they could have something devastating, catastrophic happen there as well. And so I want to make sure that everyone is equipped equally. So, we don't get tornadoes here until you do. Yeah. and then nobody should be, forecasters shouldn't be, flipping through a manual, figuring out what they need to do. They need to be ready and alert to be hitting the right buttons at the right time in a very short order and to warn the public. And I think the more challenging thing then is, do people receive that message the right way? So I think it was 2015 in the Amarillo area where they had a very rare mid-November tornado outbreak, EFs 2s, 3s, and across that area, across the panhandle of Texas. And they were having trouble messaging it, from what I could tell, to get people to take this seriously. Okay, it's a week before Thanksgiving, we're gonna have a tornado outbreak, followed by a blizzard. So these are very complicated issues. And so, I want to make sure that forecasters across the country are ready, set, go when they need to be.
Talk about Palm Sunday 65, as you mentioned it there. A lot of big things came out of that.
Yeah, so
that we enjoy today, that we still are, we think are kind of social science. We think it's kind of new today, but it was something then, right?
Oh, absolutely. And so this is the thing. So if you look at the history of where tornado forecasts turned into warnings and how in the world did we get there? Where did a tornado warning come from? So when you look back, in the transition from the 50s into the 60s, when science was now, okay, we need scientists to look at why we have tornadoes and how we can detect them. It all happened very quickly within that. And then of course you have the big event, you don't need a stoplight until somebody crashes at the intersection. And this was the type of event that was like, okay, we're in a more modern society here in the mid-60s. Tornadoes came out of nowhere in March. And, if you read the synopsis, it was basically, it was a cold winter. It was one of the first warm weekends that they had, maybe even the first warm day they had in months. So what did people do? They went outside, they enjoyed themselves. Hey, it's a warm day in March. All of a sudden, the atmosphere went, yes, it's called a tornado outbreak. And so, this was just unprecedented in that modern day society. And so they had to go to the drawing board and figure out, okay, what do we do with this? How do we warn people in advance? And then so that was the 65 outbreak was basically, do we have the infrastructure? We have these sirens from World War II that we haven't used for decades. Maybe we can use them. How do we use them? Who should control them? So the questions are being asked. How does the public need to know about tornadoes in advance? What time of day they happen? So this is where education and outreach started to really grow. And it would say some communities were more prepared than others. Why is that? So the questions and questions and questions started begetting answers. And then, it's like, okay, how's this going through the 60s and then early 70s? Boom, another historic event. And then it goes, what are we missing here? So is this infrastructure that we have now archaic? And so what this does is it allows people in the private industry, in public sectors to go, let's work together so that, you know, we have these resources, you have this voice, and all along the way, broadcasters were obviously one of the most and the most important part, because they were that direct line of communication. To this day, you know, in whatever way we can possibly show our appreciation to broadcasters, to say, we want to work with you hand in hand, lockstep, to make sure that our word, our message gets out broadly, quickly.
And so you say that that post is Astro Survey report, because I had never seen it before. I don't know how I came across it, but after your talk at OSU, I dug it up and read it, and it's my pick of the week tonight. But there's several things that are in there that are just groundbreaking. One of those, you know, is a potential Doppler radar is actually mentioned at that point, and maybe Alan can comment on that, or someone else on the panel. But I thought that was pretty interesting. And it seemed like maybe even IWTs were sort of envisioned or born, or, you know, at least created there. Talk about that.
Absolutely. And see, one of the things you mentioned, those, so the 65, 74, and even unfortunately the 2011 outbreak, what you'll see in there, and I try to make a point about that in this talk, was they all basically started with the same thing. Despite excellent watches, warnings, forecasts, and getting the message out, in a lot of cases, especially for the big tornadoes, X amount of people were lost, injuries, you know, people didn't have the warning. And especially the 2011 one, you know, now we're here in 2011, we're here in supposedly a modern day society. How are people not getting the message? And that's just the heartbreaking thing when you see of these really extreme events, is you could see a week in advance. And the question for the weather enterprise is, how in the world do we do this? And so I wasn't there for the vital conversation in late 2011. Some of you might have been, but that's what basically came out of it, the social science burgeoning. And yeah, IWTs, this idea of emergency management, core partners, people that we work with and try to get the messaging out, first line responders, the media. How do we all work together? You know, if you're on a baseball team, you know, who is at first base, who has their roles, so that we can all succeed as a team. And to their credit, they, you know, the people that wrote these the assessments of these major outbreaks understood that back then. You know, we've got all these people that do this type of position, this type of job. We need you guys to work together. And that, I think, is an amazing thing. And it has across the country, especially in tornado prone areas. I'm sure this happens, you know, in the tropical realm with people along the coast. Yeah, so I think this has just been a great relationship, if you will. I've called it, you know, the trifecta, you know, weather service, operations, and then you've got the media and also the emergency management or first line responders. So I think this has just been, you know, every incremental outbreak or something we've had has just made this grow and grow.
And you were there for the Super Derecho in 2012. One of our listeners, Justin Cook, wrote today that there are people in Iowa that are asking, why don't we have derecho warnings? So talk about the role the derecho in 2012 played in the development of some of the products that we use today, and some of the products that are going to be coming out in the future, the IBW products, and how those are changing. And, do we need a derecho warning? I bet the panel has some thoughts on that. I bet Troy does.
I mean, from what I've seen, everyone's now calling it an inland hurricane warning. So let's just call it
that. A category 2 inland hurricane.
Right. To be very serious about it, yeah, it's devastating. These derechos and even lower end squall lines can be devastating for point locations along. And So this is the thing we've been not grappling with. We've been working with it since 2012, since the assessment came out for the Super Derecho. So at the time, I was a forecaster at the Sterling office. Later on that night, that area got pummeled. And it was one of those where on either side of that day, you were in heat indices in the mid 100, 100 range. So we were in the middle of drought. And I was doing an interview with the Weather Channel about noon that day about the heat wave. And I just remember looking at our large, composite radar screen, and that's when the cells were popping around Chicago, and they were starting to grow and gather steam. And I thought, let's look at this. Let's look at some short-term models and see what happens. And most of those things don't cross the Appalachians, and that one just had a feeling it would. It just had it was a powder keg in front of it. So that was just one of those that, yeah, it's very rare, but it's super impactful. And so the problem with derecho warning is that every year after that, in the Mid-Atlantic area, every garden variety thunderstorm is that a derecho? Is that a derecho?
Mm-hmm.
And that will happen with the Iowa one for quite some time. Is everything from now for the next 3 years is going to be, is that a derecho? So the term derecho is fine for sort of the technical definition of it, that SPC will say, for this amount of miles, for this amount of time, it's a derecho, like it's a phenomenon. But severe thunderstorm warnings have been around forever, and it's ingrained in us. So what we needed to do was categorize those better. And so for the past couple of years, we've had it implemented where we have impact statements for if you increase the wind and hail size, you have more impactful statements, this more certainty, this will damage, this will harm, this will. So what we needed to do was just categorize them and do a 3-tier one, because you need sort of a base level, and then you need a little bit more of a bell ringer, which is the considerable, and it's sort of the middle tier, if you will. And then we need the one where we try to actually alert people at point locations, with their smartphone through wireless emergency alerts. And so that was what we did. First, I wanted to go out to all of the Weather Service offices and just kind of make them aware of what we were thinking. So we put out a survey. We had them really consider what was going on in terms of all of these, the categorization, and make them think, okay, how many times of a year do you issue a warning with 80-mile-an-hour or greater, with baseball hail or greater, or various amount of sizes? To make them kind of go back and scientifically think, oh, we issue those like 20 times a year or twice, and make them really kind of think about that. Also, we wanted to go out and just kind of corroborate with other parts of the weather community and get their input on it, so that everybody knew what this was. So what we're really doing is just kind of closing the loop on severes and categorizing them. And so we're allowing mainly broadcasters to go, okay, this is a considerable threat, and give that to you, and the destructive storm, so that the nomenclature is, instead of this storm's got baseball hail, you can say this is a destructive storm, and you can get a wireless emergency alert, and we're working through the language of it, but this is a destructive hailstorm, a destructive windstorm. And so it's just kind of like, you have no question about what's coming. We don't want people to kind of go through this mental gymnastics of what they need to do in this situation. There's a destructive storm here on its way, or it's over you, and then you just make that decision.
I think this is a really interesting issue, and it's a thorny issue. There are layers to it, and I appreciate where Weather Service, has been going since the 2012 derecho. I think it's fair for us, now that there's been another very disruptive, very destructive derecho, to take this opportunity to evaluate, the changes that have been implemented. How far did that get us? And do we yet have farther to go? So I'm wondering, Greg, if you can comment on where you think maybe this new tiered system might have helped Iowans, and if you can comment on places where, at least to the knowledge that we have yet, there may well be a service assessment coming. I'd be surprised if it wasn't being considered. But barring that knowledge, what you think might yet need to be done to help people in the way of these kinds of events to truly understand the magnitude of what it can be.
Yeah, really, it's going to have to be for at least a little bit about the polygon itself, because for a wireless emergency alert particularly, if you've got the polygon that goes out ahead in time, let's say an hour, so the derecho is coming, and they choose to go ahead and issue pretty far in advance, 2 or 3 counties, people will be alerted in clear sky. You know, they may be able to see some clouds coming, but, you know, a destructive windstorm. And so the questions can be raised instead of, you know, assuming that everybody is on Twitter and clicking refresh and seeing weather posts. You know, we're actually getting to people directly, as so long as the warning has those tags in them. And so that's the first step, is just, you know, technically, are you in that warning? And so that's the easiest, best way to get them right now. In the future, we would like to try to take tornadoes and severe thunderstorm warnings and move them in time a little bit, you know, incrementally, whether it's through the standard threats in motion paradigm that NSSL is working on, or a hybrid, or something that allows technically a warning to move in time and space, you know, with the forecaster's prompting. And so that may help as long as the forecaster has confidence that this is going to be continuing. And add that language, you know, this is a continuing threat. We've had a plethora of damage reports behind it, and, you know, however that language needs to be. But we want that kind of paradigm. We want people to be able to take a warning and even maybe draw a smaller warning within it, or staggered or tiered, that really gets to the heart of, there are 120-mile-an-hour winds in here, let's just say, or giant 4-inch hail. You know, so you've issued a larger warning, but then you can have a smaller warning that really gets to the heart of, this is the worst part of this entire storm that goes, you know, 100 miles north or south either way.
So a lot of what you've focused on with some of that is the where, you know, trying to help people to understand, you know, maybe give them a little bit more advanced notification than they receive now because of the patchwork quilting of the way warnings progress. That certainly sounds attractive. Do you have any inclination about whether the IBW tags themselves really helped to mollify the concerns, you know, that people didn't necessarily understand a derecho was coming or what that would mean? Do you have a sense that the people of Iowa knew how severe the threat could possibly be? And if not, do we need to think more about what we're doing to try to highlight these very extreme high-end wind threats?
I've only seen a handful of articles and quotes, as probably all of us have. I haven't been able to delve into, you know, tons of quotes, but I can get sort of the general gist of it, which is that, yeah, a lot of people felt like this happened very quickly. We didn't realize. And I don't think that, unless you've experienced it, you know, maybe in the past 3 or 4 years anyway, or maybe even sometime in your lifetime, you know, who knows what the timeline is, that unless you've ever experienced it, you won't know what it is coming, even if somebody says 120 miles an hour. Something was very interesting. I saw it in one of the Hollings presentations a student did just a couple of weeks ago, one of their findings. Don't quote me, you have to look it up. But essentially, in terms of a forecasting paradigm, if somebody said this morning the forecast was for 60-mile-an-hour winds later on today, or 80-mile-an-hour, people wouldn't make that big of a change in terms of preparedness. And so if you say it's severe, or if you put some sort of word categorization that means, hey, it's not nothing, it's something pretty big. But if it's in a range of really big, it doesn't matter to most people, again, according to early research, that you should know about it. And it's hard for forecasters to know, you know, your entire field of corn, soybeans, or whatever is going to be just wiped, you know, as if the hand of God waved across it. It's hard to know that will happen because there are issues with, you know, is all that wind coming down? We're looking at radar, but is it all that wind coming down? you really don't know in a post-storm sense. So I feel, and that we need to find this out through actually testing, will these words work? Will you hearing a destructive storm is on its way make you be prompted any more than having 100-mile-an-hour winds? And so, it's something we'll just have to find out through testing and evaluation starting next year, through the severe weather season that we have next year.
That sounds really promising and great. At this point, you've sort of raised, with the threats in motion piece, you raised the facets paradigm a little bit here. So I'd like to bring Alan in on this conversation. And I'm wondering, Alan, as you saw the event unfolding, and one of the things I think is so hard to grapple with about it is that there wasn't necessarily a lot of pre-event awareness built up. It's not like a big, tornado outbreak day. It's one of those things where there was more of a rapidly evolving environment that could be supportive of a system like this, that, we would need to have a more rapidly updating system, and maybe different kinds of products to message about this evolving threat. Do you see a potential for the full facets paradigm, where we're thinking about having more of these layers of information go out to the public, as perhaps being a gap filler where there wasn't, we're laying so much on the warning in this conversation. We're laying everything on the warning. Can we do something before that point for these very hard to forecast systems, that we don't have right now?
Yeah, and I see Todd nodding. So this is something that he and I have talked about off and on over the years, along with some of our other colleagues. That one of the things, the reality of it is the atmosphere is not a yes or no thing. It's a fluid that is very difficult to predict the ultimate state that it's going to be in, whether you're talking about 6 days from now or 6 hours from now, sometimes even 6 minutes from now, depending on how complex of a situation you're dealing with. And one of the core things with facets is the idea of providing more probabilistic information, so that folks like emergency managers can get kind of an idea of what might be possible, but not likely. And this might have been a really good event for that, because while there was, I think, recognition, sorry, my battery is dying here. Hold on just a second.
Live podcasting, everybody.
Yep. I didn't know it was unplugged.
If you weren't tweeting, talking smack about the Cubs, while you were listening,
Caught him.
I was not talking smack about the Cubs. I was talking positively about the Cardinals. It's not the same thing.
No, it's the same thing. Come on now.
True. Okay. But anyway, yeah, the whole. There was clearly a risk of severe weather on that day, but how do you convey the possibility that an event of that magnitude is going to happen? And I don't think there's any way you're going to do that with any certainty before an event, but perhaps there's a way to convey it in a way where you're basically comparing, for like an emergency manager and a broadcast meteorologist, that on an ordinary August day, the probability of a high-end Derecho type event is a certain level of probability, and today maybe it's triple that probability. So even though you're not messaging it to the whole community as there's going to be 100-mile-an-hour winds widespread today, you're enabling emergency managers and folks like power companies to have that in their back pocket as a potential worst case scenario for that day, so that maybe they're able to have at least some level of preparedness going into that event. I mean, that's one of the things that becomes so difficult in an event like that is, with a hurricane, you know several days in advance generally that it's coming. The power companies, the emergency management community, they pre-position, large resources into the area to be able to respond very quickly. An event like a derecho, where your predictability horizon is not very far, you don't have that luxury, and we have to come up with some ways. And this isn't just a social science challenge. This is a physical science challenge too. Being able to better produce short-term models that can anticipate these kind of events. That's the kind of stuff we're trying to do with Warn on Forecast, with better versions of the HER and other models that try to really capture what's going on at the scale of thunderstorms and enable us to anticipate these events better.
Yeah, one of the things that kind of occurs to me is, if any of my staff is listening, they're probably going to roll their eyes because they're tired of me talking about this. But I think, I think in many ways our communication systems are very antiquated, and we focus a lot on the uncertainty in events, right? We talk a lot about this, right, through various channels and products, and when we get on TV, all of our sectors. And we talk a lot about impacts, but we don't put the two together and talk about risk and put things in terms of risk. People think in terms of risk, whether they know that by name or whether they don't, that's what they're really doing. And I think we have to realize that everybody has a different risk profile. And this gets to this issue, right, about, I forget who said it, but getting to people in the morning when it's a clear sky and telling them that that's an uncertainty over impact type of calculation. And at that time, they make an assessment that their risk is low at that moment, right? But that risk profile changes through the day. I think, without getting too deep into this, I think we really need to kind of mature a little bit in our communication mechanisms and focus more on risk and how we get risk type of information to people, and how do we get it in a way that it rapidly updates. Because there's always going to be these instances where the uncertainty is high, the derechos are going to form when we didn't think they were going to, models didn't show it, the risk profile changes quickly during the course of the day, and our communication structure does this to some extent, right? But I think it's very disjointed at times, and I think a lot of our products and services that we communicate. This is one of my pet peeves, in how we do things in the WFO level, is that we're throwing out terms like risk and impacts, and we're not really understanding how that's landing with the customer, and that's really where the frontier is, I think, and trying to figure that out and trying to how to deliver that information to people.
I think it's a really good point that you talked about. We talk about the uncertainty, we talk about impacts. One of the things that I think sometimes we sell ourselves short on is talking about the certainty of something. We have a product that is known, if not formally, informally, as the cone of uncertainty. And when we talk to people who are not meteorologists and not scientists by trade, that just sounds like we don't know what the hell we're talking about. When in fact, the Hurricane Center's track forecasts are incredibly good and have been for some time and keep getting better. And so far, not only just in the first couple of days, but all the way out to 5 days and beyond. So I think there may be an opportunity for us to think not just about talking about these things and putting them together, but actually framing that conversation in a way that acknowledges, we don't want to ignore what we are uncertain about, but at the same time, we can't play that up so strongly that we don't talk about the things that we are comfortable about, that we do know. I want to flip a little bit and go back to the tiering of severe thunderstorm warnings. And one of the things, Greg, that you mentioned was that, the people know what these are and are comfortable with them. I would argue that by and large, most people ignore severe thunderstorm warnings, just in general. Most television stations don't interrupt programming for most severe thunderstorm warnings. Not the case in Iowa, to be very clear, but in some of these garden variety severe thunderstorm warnings, is there a risk that tiering these things in such a way that you essentially are creating, in a sense, a severe thunderstorm emergency, kind of like with tornado emergency, just not calling it that? Are we opening ourselves up to the criticism that essentially we're saying, yep, those regular severe thunderstorm warnings, they're not worth your attention. the way that these are. I mean, clearly the warnings that we would have gotten in this paradigm in Iowa this week or last week, clearly worth that ringing of the bell. But are we doing that at the risk of just continuing to encourage people to ignore severe thunderstorm warnings for more what we call garden variety storms, but storms that can still do damage?
There's always a risk in anything you do, any kind of change. And so for us, and this is why it has taken a bit, you want to do it in the best common denominator type of way. And one of the problems that's innate with severe thunderstorm warning, with this 58 mile an hour, 50 knots type of idea, is that what does that do to a tree? So I've even seen videos from Iowa where 120, 100 and some odd mile an hour winds are blowing trees and they're moving, and they didn't fall. I mean, they pretty viciously move, but they didn't fall. Some do, some don't. What about antecedent rain condition? What about the type of tree? Bradford pears fall all the time. So there are these issues, and Aubrey and I know this well in the Mid-Atlantic. You sneeze and sometimes a tree will fall.
Yeah, it's 30 down in DC.
So yes, yes.
Well, Bradford pears don't count. Those things are garbage. But your point is well taken.
Yes. So the point is, it's difficult, but you do need to have some sort of criteria, if you will. You need to have something. And I am working actively on, there are folks who study trees, who are studying wind impacts, whether it's low end tornadoes or straight line winds. I would like to solve this someday in terms of, okay, what is severe? That's going to take a while, because we do need to find something that works for, again, Montana and Key West and Atlanta and everywhere in between. And so this is difficult. Hail, there was a study about 10 years ago that basically said that penny-sized hail doesn't do damage unless it's a small aircraft, essentially. But for the most part, we're not seeing any damage, so it's not severe. So we bumped it up to a minimum criteria of an inch. So thunderstorms are difficult, and they're impactful. 60 mile an hour winds are not nothing. I've experienced them here in Norman. 55 mile an hour winds are, what is going on out there? Is that tree going to survive? And so, yeah, they are impactful. And I think the key message is, if we're issuing a warning for you, please take it seriously. Because one of the things that gets me still, and I even said it in some recent media interviews, is I feel that severe thunderstorms, the fatalities that occur from them, are one of the most preventable weather-related fatalities that there are, because they're mostly tree branches, trees, something to do with trees falling on someone, wrong place, wrong time. Unfortunately, 2-story home, large tree, falling in the middle of the night. Those kinds of things, that just gets me. And so I would like everyone to take it seriously. Tiering these, in my mind, and in those I've talked to and we've gone through it, you're going to find opinions everywhere. But I feel like we're not minimizing it, because we're not changing anything. We're still issuing a polygon. It still alerts different outlets that it alerts in the same way. All we're doing is allowing, again, broadcasters and the tiers aren't that far apart, right? 60, 70, 80 for those differences for winds. Yeah, so those types of winds aren't that much different. And so you can quickly allow the media to say, this is a considerable threat. It's not nothing, but it's higher. And then the highest one is what you'll get a wireless emergency alert for. So we're really trying to just add emphasis. We're not trying to downplay baseline severes. As with flash flood warnings, we did the three-tier system as well. We're not downplaying baseline flash flood warnings as ignore them because nothing's happening. They're important too. It's just some are a slight bit more, or even substantially more impactful than others.
Is this a place where fee, and maybe Alan, this is your bailiwick too, is this a place where a granularization of weather data and fee, probabilistic hazard information, could actually come into play here, where I could say, I live out in the middle of nowhere, I don't have any trees around, I'm not worried about 60 mile an hour winds, ding me at 75 or 1-inch hail. I mean, is that a possibility down the road here?
Yeah, and I was gonna say, just to add to what Greg was saying, that really it comes back to the point Todd made, that everybody has a different risk tolerance, and right now we're basically trying to account for all of those different levels of risk tolerance with one warning product, with one criteria, and it's very difficult in today's complex society to do that. So when we talk about facets and we talk about adding probabilistic hazard information to the Weather Service, to NOAA's repertoire, we're not doing it just, even though, like I said earlier, the atmosphere is more, amenable to probabilistic information because it's just the way it is. But it's also about being able to allow people to tailor the information to their actual level of risk, to their risk tolerance. And I thought Todd did a really good job of, it's the hazard, and it's what your level of tolerance for it is, and that's combining all of that into the risk for each individual, each person, each entity. And that's what we're trying to get at with facets, is using physical science and social science combined to try to get information that meets everybody's risk level of risk. And it's not just for severe weather, because we could have a whole nother conversation here about winter weather, about tropical weather, about flooding, about winter weather, and everybody has different levels of risk tolerance for different phenomena, and we want to try to be able to tailor that information as much as we can.
Alan, when does facets go operational?
Between now and 2035, in a very integrated process. And I mean, we get that question a lot, James, and the reality is, I don't think there's going to be a switch flip where we're going to say facets is operational today. I think we're going to introduce different concepts like threats in motion and probabilistic flash flood information, and that's all just going to kind of build up to some point where we're all probably long gone, and someone will say, wow, we finally made it to the facets concept.
I found this WeatherBrains show where they were talking about this back in 2020.
Yeah,
2020. I would assume you'll pick a few Weather Service offices as kind of a test bed, maybe, just to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's typically the way. Right now, most of the facets and concepts are still in the research mode, but we're gradually, and we work with Greg. It's great having Greg in the building with us, because even though I work at the Severe Storms Lab, obviously anything that we do on the research side is going to get implemented through the Weather Service. So we're basically working with the Weather Service to try to meet their needs, meet what they see as what their customers need, and it's very much an iterative process.
And while we're bugging you with these questions, Alan, what about phased array radar?
Well, we have, for those of you who may not be aware, we do have a new phased array radar demonstration system here in Norman that we're basically putting through the spin-up process right now, and we've started gathering data with it. And by next year, by next severe weather season, we should be, assuming we're able to continue to do field work, we should be able to really start gathering some good data with that. And basically, phased array radar is, we're basically looking at that as one of the foundational aspects of whatever the next generation of weather radar network is going to look like in the US. And it may be a combination of phased array radar and some gap filling radars. It may be primarily phased array radar. That's one of the things that the Weather Service is going to be looking at and working with researchers like us to try to figure out over the next several years.
Well, on behalf of the practitioners, thank you, Alan, for your work. That's awesome.
Yep.
Knowing it's in the works here. So all of us, thank you. This stuff just doesn't happen. It doesn't come out of thin air. But real quick, before we do picks of the week, we have to do kind of a weather roundup here. So, Todd, when's that heat dome going to get out of there?
Not soon enough. It looks like we'll get a little bit of reprieve at the end of the week here, but I'm not too sure it's going to scour itself all the way out. But should bump down for the weekend, at least get us out of unreasonable territory.
So what's the official Death Valley high? 130? Was that the number from yesterday? 130? Is that official?
That's not official. It's preliminary until we get a climate extremes committee to review it. And we're forming that as we speak, and they'll get started probably within a week.
Okay.
Plans are to actually pull that sensor and actually have it tested to see whether or not how accurate it is. And so that's something that we're doing these days, so that, you know, these old records are having problems where they're trying to get knocked down and you know, because of the way they were measured. And so we're trying to be a little more airtight with the process these days.
Awesome. And we got to talk about our two tropical waves, 97 and 98L. Who's our tropical correspondent? Nate, you're the most eastern correspondent here. What's happening with these things?
Still being watched, pretty high, better than 50% chance for both of them to turn into something here in the next little bit. One of them looks like it may be a fish storm, thankfully. The other one, the one farther to the east, I have to keep an eye on that. But at this point, with the main development region, the Atlantic is really starting to crank. Wind shear's down, sea surface temperatures are up, yada, yada. So buckle up for the next few weeks, because it's going to get bumpy.
Okay, awesome. Well, Bill, I got to turn the floor over to you for picks of the week. I got to run to Studio A. So, Bill, you got POW. Mine, by the way, it's the graphic from the Weather Service at the Quad Cities office over the Derecho event that they released today. These kind of an estimate of where the winds were. Very interesting event, and I'm glad we talked about it some. But, Bill, the floor belongs to you.
Thank you, James. Yeah, Alan, you mentioned on the Waziz page about, you know, the brouhaha that kind of developed because some meteorologists took great umbrage to, you know, some folks calling it a land hurricane. Talk about that for a second, because the end user didn't really care. It's sitting there with no power after several days and no relief in sight. So talk about that for a minute, because a lot of people seem to agree with that sentiment that our words don't matter in an event like that.
Yeah, there was a tweet from a columnist up in the Cedar Rapids area, basically kind of calling out the weather community a little bit for, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but essentially, you know, of pushback coming from meteorologists about terminology that they heard being utilized, like land hurricane and things like that, and wanting to make sure that people use the correct term of derecho. And I think the point, and, you know, Kim works, you know, here at the National Severe Storms Lab doing social science research, and this is why, is to try to help us understand, you know, why people react to forecasts and warnings, and what the wording, you know, how important is the wording, and it's not just for the lead up, it's also for after the event. I mean, one of the things that's important after the event is getting response to an area and getting media coverage so people understand the magnitude of the event, and, you know, resources can go into the area. And, you know, if it's, you know, does it matter if it's called a derecho versus a land hurricane? Or, you know, I mean, as scientists, we want to be as accurate as possible, but I think we have to recognize that for the public, they're not as concerned about that. And there are times when our kind of nature as scientists to want to be really accurate might be getting in the way of our communication.
Mm-hmm. Kim, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that's all really compelling to think about. You know, we had a conversation earlier about our tiered warnings, and, you know, that we put so much emphasis on these words as being the means through which we do all of the communication that matters. And at the end of the day, all this discussion after the event has me really wondering if the meteorological community is putting our stock in the right place. I know that we really, really want to get this as right as we can so that next time we can do better. But I think we also need to be mindful when there's a live crisis, which Iowa still is a live crisis, that, you know, this might not be the time, and we might not have the evidence before us to even know. You know, I think we really need to have a service assessment. We need to have some studies done of public response to understand a little bit better what happened there. And right now, I think the best thing that we can be doing is to try to help the response process and the recovery process, which is call out that this event has been devastating. I think if we all as a field spoke with a unified voice on this, we could break through a little bit of the COVID, you know, shell that encompasses everything, because I don't think Iowans are getting a lot of resource. There's a lot of reasons for that. There's a lot going on the ground, but I think a public push would really help. And we have a big voice, you know, as a community. And so maybe just being thoughtful about what we're taking the opportunity to say right now could go a long way. And we'll have time for hand-wringing about our word choices and how this is described at a later time. This is an ongoing challenge. The Derecho in 2012 was a recent event that started it. I think we're still going to have problems coming out of this event that we'll identify, and we're going to keep working on it.
I think a big part of this too is how social media, we love to trash on it. It's not helping here, because I think some conversation between, let's say, meteorologists and other meteorologists on Twitter or Facebook, and then meteorologists with other journalists who know enough about weather that we think should probably, you know, be avoiding this kind of things, or at least checking with other meteorologists before they print this stuff. You know, those conversations probably should be happening in private, and they're not. They're happening in a public social media forum. And the people who are affected by this are going, my livelihood has been trashed, my house is destroyed, I have a relative that is injured, and this is what you're choosing to spend your time about? And it really feels tone deaf. It feels out of touch. And it's really a really poor look, I think, for our community. And I say that not because I think the intention is good. I think our intention, to your point, as scientists, we want to be correct. That's our deal. We're seekers of truth. But I think the intention is good, but it really is one of these moments where you just got to go, you know what? It doesn't matter. For the hundreds of thousands of people who've had their livelihoods turned upside down, who've seen their crops wiped out, et cetera, you know, now's not the time. Let's chip in, let's help them clean up. And we have this conversation some other day.
So you said, exactly. So you said social media is not being very helpful, Nate. Is that a new development, or is that just something
breaking news? You know, social is there's a place for social media. I think that there are some very good qualities about it, but this is one of these things where I think we're using 1995 paradigms for communication in a 2020 world. You know, we're having these conversations on Twitter as if I'm replying to tweets, as if I'm talking directly to somebody. And I'm for a moment turning off my brain to the fact that literally everybody else on Twitter can read that tweet. And for some people, that's going to come across as insensitive, out of touch, you name it. And I think we just have to be mindful of that. It's just, this is a new way of communication. We're all still figuring it out. And it seems to be changing, you know, on a sort of daily basis, it seems like. You know, this is just one of these moments where we need to, you know, just be a little more thoughtful. And I think it goes back to two adages. Number one, praise in public, criticize in private. If you've got an issue with what another professional, if you're offering professional criticism, most of the time, the best place for that is going to be in a direct message or an email or a phone call or over a beer or something like that. And second thing is something that's I call Postel's law. It's an old internet thing, actually. And it says, be conservative in what you do and liberal in what you accept. That is to say that if you care about how things are termed, then you use the right words. But if somebody else is communicating to you and you understand, you don't have to correct them. You've made the connection, you've had the communication, you've created that shared meening. You know, And if that's not the right time to fix it, then don't, just let it go.
You know, from a professional perspective, when are we going to get to the point where we start training to this and setting professional standards, right? I mean, you know, this really ought to be what Nate just said, ought to be a course in every meteorology curriculum across the country. How to communicate and what social media is and isn't, what are the dangers of doing what we've just been talking about for the past 5 to 10 minutes. So many mistakes out there. And, you know, sometimes saying nothing is okay. We got to get to that point.
Yeah, you got to be comfortable with silence. Sometimes that's the right thing to say.
Tremendous wisdom. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Well, we lost Aubrey. She's got to go into show, but her pick of the week is we'll do picks of the week. And I didn't really alert Todd, and Bruce knows that we do picks of the week at this time. Greg, you probably know enough about the show to know that we'll do picks of the week. Alan, you may even know. So y'all work on that for a second. We'll come back to you. But Aubrey's pick of the week is their sister station, KCRG in Iowa. If you want to read what's going on, look at their stories, she says. So Nate, I'll start with you. You got a pick of the week for us, I bet.
Pick of the week, the anniversary of Hurricane Camille. And I learned today, I learned a lot of stuff today on Twitter, interestingly enough. We bash it, but there's some good stuff there. One of the good things was a tweet by a former Weather Channel and now AccuWeather meteorologist Mark Mancuso, who dropped a little bit of knowledge on me today and everybody else following, that Hurricane Camille, in a roundabout way, was named after John Hope's daughter, Camille. Yes, the John Hope from the Weather Channel and previously from the Weather Service. Not in the moment, that name was put on a list long before that hurricane came around, but interesting thing. So my pick of the week is actually a link to a blog post by the Hurricane Research Division on the 45th anniversary, talking about that story and how that came to be. And it's an interesting sort of a one-off kind of a thing, but it was one of those, wait, what kinds of moments. Definitely a good read.
Yeah, I wonder who got Nana into the list. That'll be interesting.
That's what my kids call my mother. Is Nana.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
there's lots of Nanas running around. Thank you, Nate. That's really good. Yeah, it was interesting. Yesterday, of course, was 51 years ago from the Saturday before, and Troy remembers that event, you know, at least as a child to some degree. I remember it directly in my memory, but you know, in studying it, and I had downloaded all of the recon reports from the NHC wallet project. So I pulled those up yesterday and was looking through them when I was preparing my, forecast. I thought it was interesting that, the Air Force plane that Robert Simpson called down to sent down to Camille that Saturday, the 16th, when they thought that hurricane had 100-mile-per-hour winds in it. I want to ask somebody who really knows if that time is right on that handwritten recon report. It says 16:35, I think. And I think that's, of course, 11:35 in the morning. The pressure observed there was 908 millibars. It seems like they didn't really either believe that report was that intense or something. They didn't really move those winds, Troy Kimmel, till later in the afternoon on the 5 o'clock advisory.
Yeah.
And that was observation, I want to say 2 out of Mission Goal 5 or something. I'd have to pull it all up, but they saw 905 millibars, in observation 22, which was 4:30 in the afternoon. So I thought that was interesting. That I don't know if they really believe that report, or I don't know. That would be interesting. I'd love to have Neil Frank on the show sometime, because I guess he would be our most direct information to understand that. But Troy Kimmel, I know you're going to share some screen with us tonight.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. We're talking a little about history here, and this will appeal to Bill and myself. And by the way, Greg and everyone else, Alan and Todd, everybody, thank you for being with us tonight. But I'm going to talk about history in a second, because I've stumbled onto something. But I wanted to mention real quick that I just noticed this in Austin, Texas. We actually, because of Todd's Ridge over the western part of the U.S., we have been in a north wind aloft. And we actually had a weak cold front pass here today, and we enjoyed it so much it only got up to 101. So, it was a little break. But let me tell you, in Austin right now, where I am, the dew point is 55. And we're at 10 o'clock at 78.5. That is as mild as we've been at 10 o'clock in the last week and a half. And I've already blown the overnight low, I can tell you that. So it looks like this is at least a little bit of a break. Todd, if you send that ridge this way, I'm coming to find you. So we'll take that as it is. Let me tell you my pick of the week, though, real quick. And those people that know Daryl Hertzman, I act as his press agent up at Iowa State, the Iowa Environmental Mesonet, and for everything they've been through in the last week, even up at Ames, it's been really busy, and they were down for a little bit. But one thing, if you don't know about this, and please go look at it, and I really stumbled into this more today than I had in the past, but Daryl has gotten in touch, and I don't know if it's someone at NCEI, but essentially they've gone back and found some of the hardest things that are to find out there, and that is a lot of the old National Weather Service, WSO and WSFO text data running back to about 1983. He actually has this online now where you can find it. Now, there's a trick to it because, as Alan can tell you, and Alan, you're not that old, but you know this, we had a bunch of the old WSO and WSFO codes that you have to use in the pill header, and they're not the same today. For example, one of the few places where it is, Alan, is Jackson, Mississippi, where there's JAN. Yep. But you've got to know those to get to this. And this is where I'm going to share for a second, Bill, if you don't mind. Oh, it says host disabled participant.
Oh, no.
So I guess that probably was James.
Yeah,
right?
because he doesn't pass host duties. He just passes all the work.
No problem. But folks, I'm going to send a couple of links along. Tonight, found old storm reports from the WSO here in Austin. That would be prior to 95. And I was looking at some in 93, 94, when I used to go out with the weather office here in Austin. We used to do storm surveys. Folks, I found those all the way back to 1983. You can now find a lot of that data. By the way, look for old WSOs that are no longer there. Victoria, Texas, Beaumont, Texas, Port Arthur, Texas, actually. Places like Tupelo, Mississippi. You can find those, and you can find the tornado warnings. You find the severe weather statements all in there. I found tornado warnings, Bill, tonight from the WSO at Birmingham, BHM, in the time period, all the way back to 1983. So they're all there. You just have to do a little digging. You have to do about the pills and that sort of thing. But Daryl Hertzman, as I say, is at it again. And these have been one of the tough things to find for NCEI or anyone else. And it's nice to see that that Daryl has gotten that done. You just got to know how to work with the pills, and it's a little bit in the links that I'm sending to Bill. That's my pick of the week.
That one's definitely going to be in the pick of the week Hall of Fame right there, Troy.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So that's a great. How does he do it, Troy? How in the world does he do it?
There was something, and someone else, this may be something Greg or someone knows about, but for somewhere, all this stuff was stored, and apparently he stumbled into it, and someone said, well, we don't know exactly what to do with this. And you know what Daryl said, send it to me. And he got it knocked out. And it's really amazing to look at the old storm reports from some of these WSOs that are no longer in existence. Really interesting.
That's fascinating. So I wonder if they have any of those old radar reports from Centerville.
No, I'm telling you, the
35 minutes after the hour.
Those were the old RNSs, by the way. RNS, that was a narrative summary from the radar stations. And I looked up RNS Hondo, Texas tonight. I found those.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I'll tell you one other thing before I leave, and this is what's fascinating, is I found, Alan, Bill, y'all remember this, I found the SAO for Austin. Those are the surface, those not METAR. I put in 150,000 observations for SAO Austin, and I found all the observations from 83 up to 1992. So they're all there, and Daryl's done such a great job with it.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that, Troy. That's an outstanding pick of the week. Kim, what you got for us?
My pick this week is a Washington Post article that sort of details some of the early look at the devastating impacts of the derecho in Iowa. Just returning to the point that I think we should really start thinking about as a community coming together to raise awareness about this event, what's gone on there, and to marshal resources for their recovery.
Outstanding. Yeah, unity, we need more and more of at this point, and this is a great opportunity for us to exhibit that. Thank you, Kim. All right, we'll go around the rest of the room now. Bruce, I'll start with you. What's this this postcard you're going to share with us?
136 years ago, Beadle County, South Dakota, and it's the Dakota Territory at the time, August 28th of 1884. And this tornado and series of tornadoes was seen up there. I guess this is how it developed, you know, one of those type things. But interestingly, let me get my glasses on. On the back here, on the back of this card, it actually has some writing. It says the tornado moved at the rate, this is where it's hitting a house down here, moved at the rate of 40 miles per hour in a track from 80 to 125 yards in width. It's believed to have been the same cyclone which struck Evansville, Indiana, and Henderson, Kentucky on August 29th, the next day. So, you know, there's this feeling that these things would strike one day in the Dakotas, and then the next day, the same tornado would be striking in Kentucky or something, you know. But these are from August 28th of 1884, 136 years ago.
Where'd you get those, Bruce? Those are amazing. I
found them on the internet. Back when the internet was first starting, there was a lot. I've got some really interesting old J.P. Finley stuff over here.
So you buy from eBay, right?
Yeah, it was on eBay or
Okay.
Abe Books has the old books. I've got some interesting old stuff from Finley. Yep. But a lot of it's been kind of grabbed up now. It's harder to find.
Yeah, we need to have a show on Finley. He's an amazing story for sure.
Oh yeah.
Well, thank you, Bruce. That's exciting. All right, so Todd Laricos, we'll start with you. What you got for us, pick of the week?
Well, if you need proof that anything can happen on WeatherBrains, I mean, I came on tonight and a heat wave got named after me by Troy Kimmel.
Exactly. I was keeping the sidebar stuff private, but no, if you want to bring it out, then go right ahead.
I don't know. I like heat wave, Todd. It has a nice ring to it.
It does have a good ring to it.
Yeah. And I'll keep it over here, Troy. No problem.
Okay.
My pick this evening is kind of easy. I talked about it earlier. Was the novel Prediction? It's not a novel; it's a book. Prediction Machines by Dr. Ravi Goldfarb. You'll want to get that. Even whether you do, I hope everybody comes to the NWA annual meeting, hears him talk. But if you don't, you'll still want to read this book and read it with a meteorological bent to it. It's really, you got to read through some of it because he's talking about economics. But there's a lot of applicability to our future over the next 15 to 20 years in that book. You'll enjoy it.
Outstanding. So is the registration open at this point? Todd, can we go and register now?
It is. You can go in there and register now. You could invoice for later and save your spot, or you can just go ahead and pay. But yeah, all of that is available at nwas.org.
Exciting. Well, thank you for filling us in on everything tonight. We have Nate, but we hadn't always seen Nate every week the last couple of weeks. So we're glad to have you as the current president and our president elect coming along. And Nate, I don't think I did your pick of the week, did I? Or am I just?
No, you got me.
No, I did. Okay,
Camille.
good. All right. I'm just losing my mind. It's been a very long day since 5 a.m. this morning. But Todd, thank you for being here. And Greg, I get you for a pick of the week real quick.
Speaking of losing his mind, no, my quarantine pick of the week is my son Jack, love of my life, and my wife Tanya, turns 18 months on Friday. So year and a half solid. We're walking, we're running, we're loving life, and babbling and saying all kinds of wonderful things. So that's my pick. But I do have a little plug for, since I'm not popping on here. I feel like I'm a year and a half old myself. But it's so everyone knows Weather Service radar page. If you go to weather.gov/radar, getting a new one. So Ridge 2, the second version of Weather Service radar, we're working, moving and grooving, and we're going to get that thing live here in the next few months, a couple months if you're counting. And so doing all the public outreach on it. The comment period ended. We're going to send out the service change notice to let everybody know the link and how that's going to work. So everyone uses their radar and goes to the Weather Service for their page. So that's a plug. You'll see my name pushing that out at some point. So I want to put that out. So keep that in mind. And also, we were talking about warnings. At some point here, probably later on this year, we're going to be putting out another public survey about updating warnings with warnings. So this is for the tornado, severe thunderstorm warning, flash flood, special marine, anything that's got a midway up statement that's called a statement. we're going to try to discontinue those severe weather statement, flash flood statement, and so forth, and just reissue the warning, so to speak. So a tornado warning gets updated with a tornado warning. So it's called the same thing. There's no severe weather statement that updates it. It's the same thing for severe. So it's just sort of a naming convention change that we're going to be exploring. So we're going to go through the public comment, and hopefully nothing will break on the user end. So that's what we're going to go out to the field and to end users and say, is this going to work for you? Hopefully it will. And again, this is something that started with the 1974 outbreak, and there was an outcome of that. We're finally going to try to modernize that and see if we have some success with it.
So will that get a whole new product number at that point, Greg?
No. As far as, so for the near term, the next couple of years, we'll probably still have, each tornado warning will have its number, so if it's 74 or whatever it is, as long as you have that warning, a tornado warning will update 74, 74, 74 until it's gone, and then you issue a new one. But each update, whether it's 5, 10, 15 minutes, will still be called a tornado warning and not a severe weather statement. Which people don't know that we do that now, and have been doing it for decades. So we're going to just try to do what makes sense in terms of that.
Greg, Troy here real quick, and for Alan too. It almost seems like, Greg, that would be sort of the natural transition to facets in a sense of where we go. It's just an observation from my standpoint.
Yeah, we're definitely trying to bridge gaps where we can and look across what we can do now and kind of work our way towards something that maybe facets can provide, whether it's technological or notional at some point in the future.
Good for y'all.
And one thing I didn't know that I learned from your presentation at Ohio State, Greg, is that a tornado emergency will re-trigger the WEA message, right? Even though it's in an SVS, correct?
That's right. So every time, even if you issue an update to a tornado emergency, and as long as it's got that catastrophic tag on it, within that valid warning, you issue it 2, 3, 4 times, you'll still get the wireless emergency alert. That threat continues. We saw that as very, very important because, like the Mississippi tornadoes from earlier this year in April, it just kept chugging along, and the office was very diligent about continuing the issue. It's here now, it's here now, it's here now. So yeah, definitely, we want to. That's the premier product that we have.
Well, thank you for sharing your insight with us and staying up with us late tonight, Greg. We really appreciate it. And Alan, when are we having our next tag up on this little soiree we're doing in September, the Weather Ready Fest?
I believe we're having it tomorrow morning.
I think we are. I better get to bed. We got to get some rest here, Alan.
Right.
I know you got a pick of the week for us.
Well, since we're talking about that, I think my pick of the week should be the NWA Foundation webpage, where you can find out. My dog agrees.
Well, we have a rule here on WeatherBrains. Nate instituted it. If your dog barks, you have to show it.
If we hear your dog, we get to meet him.
Well, here, Joe. Come here, Joey. Here he is.
There we go.
All right. See, everybody gets to see you.
Give that dog a biscuit.
There you go.
So if you want to learn more about the NWA Foundation and our great work, take a look at that. And now he wants up. Come on.
It's like I got a taste of the fame. I need more.
Yep. We'll have Weather Ready Fest on there when it's up online. Oh, come here.
This show is going to the dogs.
You got that right.
No, I got cute pupper.
Well, it's going to be a lot of fun. So it's not too late for any meteorologist, any organization to reach out and be a part of this. If you got a weather outreach educational message, 15 to 45 minute recorded presentation, we will put it to good use, won't we, Alan?
Absolutely.
All right. Outstanding. All right. Did I miss anybody? Do anything? Troy, is there anything else we need to do?
I make the motion we adjourn this meeting.
Anybody want to second that? I think Kim just seconded it. All in favor? WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast all about weather. Next week, Neil Jacobs will be with us for the first half hour. Jay Hobgood will join us. We'll be talking hurricanes. Kevin Laws will be our guest panelist. Lon Curtis will be here on the 31st. Matt Lands on the 8th. We got great guests all the way out through October. But we usually record on Monday nights. We'll record on Tuesday, September 8th. That's the only variation on the schedule coming up anytime soon. But please tell your friends about us. Email us those questions, guest suggestions. We'd love to hear about them. But until we do this again next Monday night, I'm guest booking officer Bill Murray for the whole panel. I'll tell you to have a great week. Keep an eye to the sky because you'll always have something fun to look at. Thanks, everybody. It was a lot of fun. Todd, thank you. See you.
Good to see everybody.
See y'all on the virtual here soon. Alan, thank you. Talk to you in the morning.
Bye, Joey.
Thanks,
Bye,
Todd,
Joy.
Greg, everybody.
See y'all. Bye, Greg.
on the air in the WeatherBrains corporate headquarters. Nope, they're done. All right, this is that weird time. It's that weird time. So we're simulcasting. So some of you are watching the WeatherBrains live stream. Some of you are watching Song of the Night on the Gram. This is where we all intersect here. It's the intersection of the different cultures. If you're watching WeatherBrains, thank you. Had a great show, a long show, but a great show. Some great guests, great dialogue tonight. If you're watching Song of the Night, check out WeatherBrains. And if you're on WeatherBrains, check out Song of the Night. It's on my Instagram feed. But we got to kill the WeatherBrains feed now because I got to get back in Studio A in a second here. So thank you guys for watching. Great show tonight. Have a great week and God bless. Bye-bye. All right.